IB Nation, welcome back to another edition of the Irish Breakdown podcast. That's Shaun Davis. I'm Brian Driscoll, and we got to get right into it, Shaun, because it was a very busy weekend for Notre Dame. Normally this time of year, normally once spring practice is over, the weekends are kind of calm and quiet. But this weekend, very busy because Notre Dame had 6 players taken in the 2025 NFL Draft. They also had a big commitment this weekend, and so that's what our focus is going to be on today. Shaun and I are going to break down first and foremost at the beginning. We're going to dive into the commitment of Ayden Pouncey, who committed to Notre Dame this weekend. We were not surprised by his commitment. We knew that was going to happen. That had already happened silently. But the timing of it was obviously a lot quicker than we expected. So we're going to break that down. And then, of course, we're going to talk about the NFL Draft. And we're going to look at the NFL Draft from 2 different aspects. We're going to first look at it from the standpoint of just kind of looking at the 6 players that were drafted and just kind of sharing our thoughts. I know Shaun's got some pretty intense views on where Xavier Watts got drafted. We're on the same page on that one. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about, the fits and things like that. Spend just a little bit of time just kind of recapping the draft and, maybe sharing some other observations and thoughts about the 2025 NFL Draft. But then we're going to have some fun and kind of look at the 26 NFL Draft. And in between those 2 conversations, we're going to have or those 2 topics, we're going to have a conversation about. I've had a lot of people reach out to me and say, hey, they're concerned. Why did Notre Dame only have 6 guys drafted? Ohio State had 14, Georgia had 13. And apparently there's some people in the media talking about it. I don't know, but I can just tell you what I'm told. And so I was like, well, let's discuss it. I wrote an article about it today at Irish Breakdown, but we're going to discuss it as well as why is Notre Dame only having 6 players a sign that they're still not there yet? Or does it say something else? And Shaun and I think we're on the same page on the Shaun. We believe it's something else, and we'll get into that here during that show. And then, of course, we'll kind of take a glimpse, an early look at the 2026 NFL Draft and Notre Dame's potential prospects in it, because I have a feeling the next 2 to 3 drafts are going to be a lot more busy than this past weekend's draft was for Notre Dame, especially on days 1 and 2. So, but before we begin, my friend, Shaun Davis, how are you today? You ready to rock and roll?
Yo, I'm absolutely ready to rock and roll. It was a busy spring covering recruiting, blue and gold game practices. And then my birthday anniversary was this past week. So I just took some time off and just really enjoyed spending time with the missus. So I'm happy to be back locked in on Irish Breakdown and Notre Dame football. Can't wait to talk.
And I'm so glad that we finally got a chance to have Tiff and Angela meet. And they also met Trevor's wife. So after the blue gold game, the 3 of us are as the 3 couples were able to get out to dinner. So that was good to see as well. So I know they've both heard about each other, but have never met yet. So
yeah,
that was always a pleasure as well. So Shaun, we're going to kick things off obviously on Saturday, kind of in the middle of the draft. I got a heads up that they were going to get a commitment from, a player that we knew to be committed to them silently was going to go public a little sooner than expected. That was Ayden Pouncey, a 6'3", 175-pound cornerback from the state of Florida. He plays at Winter Park High School. If this name sounds a little familiar to you, it should, because he's the younger brother of 2020 cornerback Aiden Pouncey, who Notre Dame recruited, and also the younger brother of Jordan Pouncey, who was a wide receiver that was committed to Notre Dame as part of the 2017 class. Jordan ended up decommitting after Mike Denbrock was let go. And obviously Notre Dame went through that 4-8 season, went to Texas, ended up at Florida. Jordan has actually been with Ethan on both of his visits to Notre Dame, which I found, or Aiden, excuse me, which I thought was very interesting, and we'll have a little bit about that. But this is a very talented cornerback, Shaun, consensus 4-star recruit, grades out as a 4-star player on my board, on the Irish Breakdown board. He is listed. I've seen some people. I want to make sure we're clear on this, Shaun. A lot of people keep saying safety, 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 safety. And maybe he ends up playing safety. But 2 things. Number 1, he plays cornerback in high school, also plays receiver and returns kicks. And 2, Notre Dame is absolutely recruiting him to play corner. Anyone can move somewhere else. Notre Dame, 2 of the last 3 defensive backs drafted by Notre Dame began their careers at wide receiver in Cam Hart and Xavier Watts, but they are recruiting him to play cornerback. Notre Dame sees a cornerback, and when we rank him and we grade him and we evaluate him, we do so as a corner as well. And so now we'll talk about that versatility a little bit, but that's something that we needed to clear up, Shaun, before we get started. Is this is a guy that when Mike Mickens sees him, he does not see a safety that will give a shot to play corner, and then eventually they see a kid that they're recruiting with the thought this kid is going to play cornerback for us. And I think with the track record that Mike Mickens has with Sauce Gardner and Cam Hart and Leonard Moore, and even going back to Bowling Green, Nick Johnson was a 6'1", 6'2" kid who was a freshman or an all conference player as a true freshman at Bowling Green under Mike Mickens. I think the track record for Mike Mickens says, hey, if he thinks this kid at 6'3" can play cornerback, we should probably at least maybe think that there's something there.
Yeah, and I love the identification. We'll get to the film breakdown and watch that and talk about what we like and things that he's probably going to have to lock in to play at the next level or play at Notre Dame, whether or not it's going to be at the field or whether or not it's going to be at the boundary. But most of all, the profile of this kid, the length, 6'3", you're going to see when you watch the film why Mike Mickens likes this particular player. And anytime Mike Mickens loves a player, you pretty much give him the benefit of the doubt, regardless of what your thoughts might be. You said he's a 4-star, the way you rank him. And so I see the same type of talent. Now, it's going to be up to him. And of course, Mike Mickens, once he gets on campus, where is his ceiling going to be? And that's going to be interesting to talk about as we watch his film. But to hear, we're going to background, we'll go into that.
We can go into that now, Shaun, if you want to transition into that. Go ahead.
I remember talking to him right after he got his offer officially. And he's like, I've been talking to Coach Freeman and Coach Mickens for months, and I've been waiting for the offer. Like, this is the offer I've been waiting for. So that just tells you how much, I guess, communication equity had been built up by Marcus Freeman and the rest of the staff with this young man. And then the connection, you talk about his brother's connection with Mike Denbrock, his family's familiarity with Notre Dame, what it has to offer in totality. Like, that kind of cuts to the minutia, right? Now that's already understood. Now we can really build the relationship, talk about how you fit, talk about how we see you. Like you said, there are other people, other programs that might be recruiting him at the safety position. I think it was very clear early on where he stood with Notre Dame, where he stood with Coach Freeman, and where he stood with Mike Mickens, and he ultimately ends up committing to the class.
Now, for looking into the backstory, Shaun, the recruitment was an interesting one because Notre Dame did offer a little bit later. There's reasons why. I mean, especially with the background, you got to make sure that this is going to make sense for you. And when they started this recruitment, there were several schools that were ranked that were just in a better position for Notre Dame. And what's interesting is even this weekend, I reached out to a buddy of mine down in Florida and kind of got his thoughts on, where he saw this, because I wanted to see if he had heard kind of what we knew to be true, which is that this young man had committed to Notre Dame. And then I eventually let him know, hey, I let him know kind of what was going to happen. He's someone who I know. I wanted him to be prepared. He's hooked me up with some info in the past. So I wanted to do right by him. And he was like, wow, that's surprising. And because as of last week, Miami and Florida still both thought they were going to get him. So obviously he hadn't quite yet told those coaches what was going on. And then by the time my buddy hadn't talked to them since then. But that's kind of where this one was trending for a long time, or at least the perception was, Shaun, including from me. I felt that way as well, that this is one where he might be tough to get out of Florida, especially when you look at kind of the fact that Notre Dame had tried unsuccessfully to sign both of his brothers. And then, of course, the Florida schools were pushing hard for him as well. Also had an official visit set up to LSU already slated. He was going to make a trip to LSU, and he also had offers from Georgia. He had an offer from Florida State. He had offers from Michigan, Penn State, Tennessee, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Nebraska, South Carolina, and a long list of schools. This is a kid with a very, very impressive offer list. And things started to move a little bit on his first visit. Notre Dame kind of put themselves in the mix, and we talked about that on the message board going into that visit. Like, this visit's going to be huge because it's the first time he'd been to campus as a recruit. I believe he'd been to campus before as a child with his brothers. Because if you think about it, when Jordan committed, he'd have been not even 10. Aiden wouldn't have even been 10 because that was back in 2016. That was 9 years ago. So unless he's 18 already, which he isn't, or 19, he would have been less than 10. And then even 5 years ago when they were recruiting Ethan, he would have been, 12, 11, 12 or so. So this is the first time he'd been on campus as a recruit, as him being recruited. And Notre Dame did very well. They put themselves in the mix. That was the big thing, is they had put themselves in the mix. And the key was always going to be the follow-through. What happens next? Well, Mike Mickens did Mike Mickens things over the next couple weeks, and then they got Ayden Pouncey to come back in late April. And when we saw that, when I was told that, Shaun, we both kind of had a, that's interesting. He's coming to Notre Dame right before the quiet period starts for a second visit in a month. We're like, all right. And what we said at the time was like, look, the perception is that the Southern schools are still the schools to beat. But this is a huge opportunity for Notre Dame. Now, what we thought was going to happen is Notre Dame was going to knock it out of the park again, and then they'd be the team to beat going into officials. Because, again, this is a young man that had already scheduled official visits for June with LSU and with Miami, I know for a fact, and I believe he had one either set or was working on setting one up for Florida as well. Coming out of the visit, I got a call that night. It's done. I'm like, excuse me, what do you mean it's done? So then I make another call, and I'm like, I get a call back, and I'm like, yep, it's a done deal. He committed, but he's probably not going to go public till mid-May. So, we said we put out what we put out, which is Notre Dame did a great job. We really like where this one is going. And, of course, all the crystal balls start going out, and I think that was ultimately kind of what my opinion – this is my opinion. This part isn't intel. My opinion is that's kind of was like, look, they're already all saying it. Might as well just kind of get it over with and then help recruit this class. And that's what happened. And so Aiden Pouncey made the decision he was going to commit on Saturday. And so he committed. He's in the class. He's fired up about being in the class. And – I think at the end of the day, Shaun, there were two things that really factored into this for Notre Dame. Number one, obviously Mike Mickens' track record with DBs and the relationships and all that type of thing. The second thing is there's a reason why both Pouncey, the older Pouncey brothers, had interest in Notre Dame. Mom's a teacher. Academics are very important to them. It just, the fit wasn't right for Notre Dame for multiple reasons. If Mike Denbrock doesn't get let go, Jordan Pouncey's coming to Notre Dame. I mean, the older brothers come to Notre Dame if that doesn't happen. If they don't have that 4-8 debacle and the coaching turnover and all that stuff, they would have maybe got two of the three. But the fact is that mom is very much into the academic side of things. All three of these young men are very strong students as well as student athletes. And so she's always been sold on Notre Dame. But the difference now is there's now a more proven track record of success with these type of players. And that played a huge difference in why they were able to make this one happen compared to the last one and some of the other young men like him, is because you can now look back and say, you want to come here and play for championships? Check. You're someone who cares about the academic piece? Check. Oh, you want to play in the NFL and you want to be a high draft pick? Check. And that's what he's been able to do. Mike Mickens and Marcus Stream have been able to do. And it's just such a different dynamic now. You want to talk about how last season is impacting recruiting? This is another example. Now, he always would have been interested in Notre Dame, but without that track record of success for the NFL and without them playing for a championship, is he in the class right now? I don't know that for sure, but I have my doubts. And so this is another example of how what they did on the field this year is the same. And this keeps getting asked on. Ivan Taylor went to West Orange in Winter Garden. Aiden Pouncey's from Winter Park. I get the confusion, and also they both have orange in their uniform, so I totally get the confusion. But just want to point that out. He is not from the same high school as Ivan Taylor. But when you look at it, Shaun, this is just was a great job by the Notre Dame coaching staff to get this one done, get it done this early. But you are seeing the fruits of what you and I have been saying all along. Give them a reason to come, and they will come. And that's what we're seeing with players like Ayden Pouncey.
Another kid from South Florida or from the state of Florida, which Notre Dame struggled, right? They got a commitment from Ivan Taylor last year, and then eventually decides to decommit and go to another program. But ultimately, I think everything kind of adds to or contributes to this commitment from Ayden Pouncey, right? The winning on the field.
Second year in a row, though, that they've got a corner from Florida that you and I rank as top 100 caliber player, because obviously last year Dallas Golden. Right. So to follow that up is big. Third commitment in this class from Florida to go with Noah Grubbs and Dylan Faison.
So you start to understand that they are making inroads in a place that was pretty much, without going back to the former, just kind of untapped, honestly, from the program, and especially at the skill position areas. So I think you're starting to see this program really get a clamp or set up root in certain areas that are going to yield a lot of fruit in the years to come. I think that's what you're really starting to see from a recruiting standpoint, a tree that is really still growing and has yet to fully mature, but you're starting to get that first fruit from it, and it's really sweet. And I think that it's only going to get even sweeter as we go out through the 26th class and finish this out, and further classes moving forward. But this is for me. I can't wait to get to the film, because I know people wonder about, I saw a great conversation, measurables as far as guys to the NFL. Normally, the average height, what it is not a lot of guys that fit his measurables to play the position of defensive back. But, I think you watch the film, you see the ability. And once again, we could throw analytics out, we could throw measurables out. We'll get to this when we get to the draft. The eyes, nothing is better than having the eyes to be able to see what others can't see. The tape doesn't lie.
Here's the reality, though, Shaun. When you talk about there aren't a lot of corners that are that tall, the numbers are low. Well, here's why this kind of recruitment helps Notre Dame, because two of the taller starting cornerbacks in the NFL are Mike Mickens' products. Sauce Gardner, who he recruited, and then obviously coached to be a freshman All-American at Cincinnati. And then, of course, with what he did with Cam Hart. And so, people can say, hey, look, we want you to play corner, want you to play corner, want you to play corner. And then you look in the cornerback room and you're like, there's nobody in here that looks like me. Like all your corner, like your tallest guy is like 6'1". None of these guys look like me. So you're telling me that I'm going to play cornerback, but I see all your 6'2" plus guys over there in the safety room. So yeah, you're telling me that, but is this really how it's going to be for me? Where when he walks into the Notre Dame cornerback room, he's not looking down at Leonard Moore. He's slightly taller than Leonard Moore. And even like a guy like Christian Gray, Christian Gray is Notre Dame's shortest cornerback on the depth chart right now at 6 feet tall. Carson Hobbs is 6'1", and Creed Thomas is 6'1". And so when you look at that track record, when Notre Dame tells you you can play corner for us, then there's a track record to say, okay, this guy thinks I can play corner, and he knows how to develop people like me at corner. That's what Joey O'Brien can feel as a defensive back. That's what Ayden Pouncey can feel. That's what impacted with Jadon Blair. He can look and say, well, look what Notre Dame did with Kyle Hamilton. So and then he visits and he sees Luke Talich. And he's like, okay, they're not afraid to have tall safety. So yeah, somebody like me can fit in there much better. And that track record is huge. It goes back to the story I told back in the day about Alizé Mack. And one of the things I can't remember if he told me or somebody I was working with, but I remember in a story I wrote, he basically said, when I went to UCLA, they got on the board and they drew up all the different things how they were going to use me in their offense. But we didn't really watch film. When I went to Notre Dame, they just popped in tape of Tyler Eifert and showed me this is how we're going to use you. And so those are things that you look at and say the fact that they know that and they can show that is huge for Notre Dame. And so that was a big factor in why this decision was ultimately made. And I think the relationships part that you talked about is a big reason why it happened so quickly.
Yeah. And I think for him, the visit, I think there was always interest. I think he came up for the Florida State game, if I'm not mistaken. I think we were conversing.
I think look.
I think it was the Florida State. It was it was the Florida State game because his original plan was to come up for the Louisville game.
Okay.
And then he ended up coming up for the Florida State game. And so coming off of that Florida State game, like you said, you know, the buzz was he's going to stay in state, Miami, Florida, because at that point in time, Florida was kind of picking up steam because of the way they ended the season, and their recruiting class in 26 was really starting to pick up steam. And so that's why people felt the way they felt about his recruitment. But Notre Dame stayed at it. And like I said, that, you know, that conversation that they had laid and the communication that had been laid by Marcus Freeman and Mike Mickens stayed with him. And as I said before, when you have family, normally Notre Dame is going to do a great job with family. The mother having a background in education, that sets the stage for an understanding and a conversation to go on with Ayden and his brothers. You know, like you said, he would have been committed if certain dominoes had not fallen. Right. So there's already an affinity within the family for Notre Dame to be able to counter what we know still exists today in negative recruiting when it comes to Notre Dame. And it's even worse now because they can't say you can't win anymore. They can't say, well, you're not going to get to a national championship. Notre Dame just did it. Mm-hmm. So now what else do they go to? And so having that type of connection within the family helped to counteract, helped to answer some questions. And then it kind of helped Notre Dame because there's certain things that they really didn't have. They could lay it on the table, but they didn't have to push it because they have the family pushing it.
Right.
When he goes back home from a visit or he gets off a phone call or off a text thread, the family is pushing that side for Notre Dame or helping Notre Dame in that aspect. So there are a lot of things I think that led to this that worked in Notre Dame's favor. And go ahead, because I know
one more thing about that, because you kept talking about we'll do class impact next and then do film. But one quick thing. One of the dynamics I was very interested to see how it was going to play out was the fact that Jordan came with him on all of his visits. And you're like, okay, this could be really good or really bad for Notre Dame. And from what I understand, Jordan was very supportive of the push from Notre Dame and very supportive of his brother going to Notre Dame. There was no, well, this is why I decommitted. I mean, this was my journey, and I'm here to help you with your journey. I did my thing. And there, from what I understand, I don't want to say like Jordan Pouncey has any regrets or anything like that. I'm not saying that, but what I mean is he didn't decommit from Notre Dame because there was any sort of negative feelings about the institution or about it. There was nothing wrong. The guy that was recruiting him, the guy that he wanted to play for, got let go by a coach who's not here anymore. A lot of things that he liked about Notre Dame, his brother obviously likes, but the football situation is way different. And I think those things really are huge factors into why this deal was able to get done. Let's talk about the class impact too, Shaun. Obviously, with the success that Notre Dame's had in the secondary last couple of years, they went into this cycle looking at things a little bit different. They're going to take numbers because every coach is at the point now where it's like, look, I'm just going to load up till you tell me stop taking kids. I mean, that's kind of the strategy. Like I talk to a lot of coaches now, and it's like in the past, like, well, we're looking to take 2 or 3. Now it's like, look, I'm going to keep recruiting until they tell me stop recruiting. I love that mentality. I really do. I mean, there's something to that, but at the same time, it's like, there's also some strategy involved. But, talking to people, around a program about what you're looking for in this class, the last 2 years, numbers were a huge need, Shaun, huge need. Because when you looked at, obviously, safety recruiting had been an issue for years, very inconsistent numbers wise. They were just really light on corners. When you kind of looked at, just kind of where Notre Dame was numbers wise, they had some big misses at corner. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that they had a couple defensive backs move over to the secondary, Notre Dame's secondary the last couple of years would have been in much tougher shape than it was. And then you come out in your 2023 class, you get Christian Gray and Micah Bell at corner. Micah Bell doesn't stick. You get a Don Schuler, you get Ben Minnick, and you also then go out and get Luke Talich, who was not considered a scholarship recruit, but was always recruited like a scholarship player. And the plan was always he was going to get one super early. And now, as you see, Luke Talich is in the mix to start for Notre Dame. That helped sort of put some ointment on the wound a little bit, right? Then last year Notre Dame comes out, they get 3 corners, they get 3 safeties, and the talent was increased. I mean, you got Dallas Golden, who graded out as a top 50 player for me. You got Mark Zachary as a top 100 recruit. Cree Thomas, who we had as a 4-star top 150 recruit. You got Jadon Blair, who graded out as a top 50 recruit. You got Brandon Logan, who graded out as a top 250 recruit. And then Ethan Long, who was my lowest graded defensive back, but he was a kid that had a high ceiling. He just, he's got some work that's got to get done. But 3 corners, 3 safeties. You had 2 kids in the class that have the tools to play nickel, which in my opinion, primarily Dallas Golden and Brandon Logan both have potential to be nickels as well, like starting nickels as well. So because of the fact that you landed 6 safeties, and then the 24 class, kind of the in-between class, you obviously got Leonard Moore and Carson Hobbs at cornerback. You got Tabron Benny Powell. You got Bronte Johnson. You got, I'm missing somebody at safety, Kennedy Urlacher, who's now gone because the numbers are so deep. I forgot about that class. But you're talking about like you've now fixed your numbers problem. So what was the focus coming into this class? Talent. It's not so much numbers, it's talent. We're looking for high upside talent. Got to commit from Chaz Smith at cornerback. You're now get a guy like Ayden Pouncey. So Notre Dame was looking for high upside players at corner and safety. Getting a player like Ayden Pouncey certainly gives you that. And then also, let's be honest, I mean, Mike Mickens is looking for a type. Chaz Smith is listed at 6'2". Ayden Pouncey is listed at 6'3". There's some other pure corners that they're still recruiting. I don't think that this necessarily means Notre Dame is done recruiting cornerback, just because, again, you got to think about it. As I've said before, Mike Mickens would like to ideally have that nickel spot be a corner, not a safety. And that's why they went out and recruited Devontae Smith this year instead of, Jordan Clark and Thomas Harper, who are more safety types. And then, of course, you see Dallas Golden getting a shot at nickel. You see Carson Hobbs getting a shot at nickel this spring. So, and then you look at a guy like Kerry Adams, whose Notre Dame is also recruiting. He's 6'1". So he's a guy that they're still pushing for. Joey O'Brien is a hybrid guy, can play safety, can play corner. They might even give a shot to play some receiver as well as a two-way player. But all of the kids that we're talking about they've been pushing so hard for are high upside guys, to the point where a couple guys that we really, and I don't want to say their names because they're not completely backing off on, but a couple guys that I know you and I like on film, they're not really pushing as hard for right now because they're zeroing in on some higher upside players. So when you recruit numbers and you rebuild your depth chart, Shaun, that allows you to go on the road and not have to worry about numbers. I can worry about talent. And that's also allowed them, because the corner board has not been very big. And I've had people say, like, dude, if you miss out on this guy and this guy, you're in trouble. And I'm like, I get that, but just be patient, let it play out. Like, they know that. But when you have a smaller board, you can now devote more attention to the players on that board. And that's what Mike Mickens was able to do. And not only getting Chasten Smith, but getting him to stay in the class, because the teams are still trying to flip him. And then also, of course, be able to go down and dip into Florida for Aiden Pouncey. So you've gone down into Florida. You beat Miami, and you beat Florida, and you beat Florida State for a kid they all wanted. That's that hasn't happened a whole lot at Notre Dame for that position over the years, Shaun.
And while answering all of those questions that you talked about as far as numbers, let's not get it twisted. It's been proven that Mike Mickens is still going out finding good talent and elite talent while being able to fill all of those other needs as well. So now you streamline it and funnel it a little more for him, and he can just focus on, I'm just going after talent. He's been doing that. So now he can give more focus to those top end kids that you talked about. And now the guys that they're in on, right? Kerry Adams, Jazeel Hart, Joey O'Brien, those type of guys. Well, yourself, from an evaluation standpoint, not his evaluation, just from our evaluation standpoint, we might have preferences, but we really don't care. Give us a combination of all of those guys that are left over, right? And that's a darn good class. That's a really elite level class from a talent perspective, regardless of measurables. Because like you said, you can go to lengthy guys like a Kerry Adams and a Joey O'Brien, Aiden Pouncy, and then you go all the way down to guys that probably fit the measurables of what you want at a nickel in college football, like a Jazeel Hart And that's what you have. You just have a mixture of elite guys with elite talent, no matter what the measurables are. And that's a great position to have. I think the impact of the class, when you talk about putting him with Chasten, Smith already, is that, now I think he starts to look at his board. Speaking of Mike Mickens and Marcus Freeman, they start to look at the board. And now they can have a conversation with, we have this. How would we prefer this play out? We know what we have left on the board. We have official visits coming up. How would we like for this to play out? And now how are we going to customize communication, visits, and official visits to make sure that we optimize and get what we ultimately want? That's not something that they're going to share outside of that personal conversations. But I think having Pouncey and Smith going into the silent period as they prepare for the official visit period, that puts them in a great position to really be able to go out and close out this class with talent that, honestly, they're going to be closing out with people that are probably ranked higher than the two young men that they have in the class already. And we're talking about 4-star level with a higher ceiling type talent coming into the class that's already committed. So that's a great position. And the class impact, when you look at it and you start to see all of the other people that are uncommitted, committed players are retweeting about Ayden Pouncey's commitment, but also uncommitted players are saying, hey.
Yeah, and I'm going to add more to that. That's a great point. I want to add more to that in the what's next section because I have some thoughts on that as well. Last thing on the class impact too, Shaun, is I do think Ayden Pouncey has field and boundary skills. I think Notre Dame would like to have more guys that can play both, like Leonard Moore, like Christian Gray. I mean, that's the reality is and Benjamin Morrison could as well. If Benjamin Morrison needed to play to the field, he could have played to the field. He's just better as a boundary guy. They want to have more guys that aren't just field guys or just boundary guys. If you can play in the boundary, you probably can play to the field, but not everybody that can play the field can't play to the boundary for different reasons. But I do believe Ayden Pouncey is a guy that can play both. And the reality is that talking about the potential of him playing safety or nickel is not out of the question either. And so let's be real about that. Notre Dame's recruiting him as a corner. They like him at corner. But if in 2-3 years they're sitting there saying, dude, you're our third or fourth corner, you could go be a number 1 at safety or number 2 at safety. Like let's say they lose Bronte and Jadon Blair to the NFL draft like really early. They're standouts, whatever. Or there's some other type of issue. And they're like, look, you can go start there or be a backup here. They're going to then move them and give them a chance to start somewhere else. But you can't do that if you can't play that position. Like some guys are just like, well, yeah, I mean, you're a backup at corner, and that's your life because you can't play something else. I think Ayden Pouncey, in theory, could play all 5 spots in the Notre Dame defense. And I felt that about Dallas Golden last year. I think there's positions I like him better at. I don't love him in nickel based on what Notre Dame has done, but we have seen guys like him thrive in that role, especially as kind of like rover hybrids. If they're going to play more zone, I could see them using him more in that nickel slot as a zone. I mean, think about him playing taking on the hook curl zones and playing the flats, and things like that. And so, running up the seam in cover 3 or, things like that, and also, playing that hook curl zone in cover 2, different things like that, Shaun, where it's like, dude, you get a guy that long playing that in more zone looks, he can do that. But as a man guy, I really like him outside. I think he can play safety. I'm not going to sit there and pretend like I don't like some of the tools to translate to safety. But me saying that doesn't mean I don't think he can play corner, because here's the reality of it. If you can't run well enough to play corner, you're going to have a tough time playing safety in an elite level in this defense for what Notre Dame tries to do is in certain spots. So now some guys just don't have the body types or whatever to play. Like Adon Schuler's not playing cornerback at Notre Dame, but Adon Schuler didn't play at Notre Dame, didn't play safety because he's too slow to play corner. He just he doesn't have a corner game. And that's the thing that I like about this pickup is you are adding a young man that can play everywhere. Like Chaz Smith is a corner. Like he can play, I think, field and boundary and maybe could even play some slot. He's going to have to get stronger to play slot, but there's some things I like. But he's a corner, like corner. This is a young man that is a corner with the ability to play other positions at a high level. And when you can add a kid like that, a chess piece like that to your class, Shaun, it's huge. It's what we talked about with Dallas Golden last year. Well, you got Mark Zachary, you got Cree Thomas. Okay, well, where does Dallas Golden play? Wherever the heck you want to play him. I mean, he might be the recruit that has more potential to play more positions than anyone that Notre Dame has ever recruited in my adult life, in that he can not only play all 5 DB positions, you could move him to running back and he could play running back for you, and you could move him to receiver and he could play a receiver for you. And by the way, it's a pretty darn good flip and return man in high school as well. Well, Aiden Pouncey brings you some of that on defense. And look, if you ever got into a really bad spot and you were just like, dude, we don't have anybody who can play receiver. This kid can go over and play receiver because he's a pretty good wide receiver and a pretty good returner in high school, which you guys will see in the film. So, you know me, Shaun, I love kids like that. That's one of my biases. I tend to give guys like that a bigger boost than I give guys that can just kind of play one spot. I'll admit it. So if you can do multiple things as a prospect, I'm going to bump you up. That's one of the reasons that I told people Xavier Watts was a top 100 player coming out of high school. It's like, look, I think this kid can start for you and be a standout at multiple positions. I liked him a receiver. Notre Dame staff didn't want to play him there. He eventually moves over to safety, and he becomes arguably the most decorated safety in Notre Dame history. And I think Ayden Pouncey has some of that. Not quite as much as Dallas, but a lot, where this kid can help you on both sides of the ball and at multiple positions in your defense. And that's the last big part of the class impact when you look at him specifically. You ready to watch some film, Shaun?
Let's do it.
You're always ready to watch film. It's one of the things I love about you, man. We're always ready to talk some film. Shaun will text me like 12 o'clock at night, like, yo, I'm just watching this kid. I'm like, dude, it's 12 o'clock and you're watching film. I knew there's a reason I liked you. So let's watch a little bit of Ayden Pouncey, y'all. You're going to see him first clip of the game, Shaun. First clip you see, and you see this on his some of this game film too, is he's a hitter. He's going to have to get stronger, but he's a hitter. And look at the ground he covers. There's so much I like. The fact that he reads it this quickly, like watch, the quarterback is not even released the ball yet, and he's flying downhill. Number one. Now you got to be a little careful because, a little pump fake, it might get you, but he flies downhill. Look how quickly he gets to full speed. That's important for me because a lot of guys that are tall, Shaun, they need time to build up speed. You see him fly downhill and just lay this kid out. There's some strength there, and you see it as a return man too, Shaun, where this kid, even though he's 6'3", 375 pounds, he's a little bit skinny, he's strong for his size, and it's only going to get stronger as he fills out and spends some time in a college weight room. Like, look at that. Look at that leg drive right there.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that is not your typical tall, skinny kid that, I'm just going to go out of bounds. Nope, I'm not going out of bounds. Y'all better keep coming at me. It's a big time. And I love that. I know my dad would hate that, but I'd tell him not to do it, but I kind of love that. Blowing a kiss to the sideline. He got flagged for it. That's why I don't love it, but I love it. You know what I mean?
And I think when you watch this film, you can let me make sure I say this within context. You talk about his times. Well, time was an issue for someone we know to be a first-team All-Pro in the National Football League by the name of Kyle Hamilton. The time was his issue coming out of college, right? But he covered ground as fast as anyone when you watch the film. So you talk about his length and the time, but what is the football speed? How much ground is he covering? Whether he has his hands in the ball or, and this is something else that I think Mike Mickens does an incredible job that you see from watching this film offensively. Long speed right there, that long speed. There you go. Not as explosive possibly as a Bubba Frazier.
Right. His first step's not going to be like a 5'9", 5'10" guy.
No. But my point is, I love Mike Mickens because Ayden Pouncey is a very instinctive football player. And when you have great instincts, that makes up for what the clock might say. You play faster than what that stopwatch is saying because you have instincts, you have
Look at that. Love that cutting
anticipation.
ability, Shaun. Look at that athleticism just to be able to jump cut like that. That
Because
back cut right there.
he's an instinctive player.
Right. But
with the ball,
look, I don't care how instinctive I was in high school. I was a pretty good athlete in high school. I'm not making that move. It's not just instincts, but it's also you got to have the athleticism to do what you're.
I was about to give you a little bit of credit, bro.
I mean, I was athletic, but I wasn't doing that. I told you before, man. Like I thought I was really hot stuff until I went and saw Ronald Curry play, and I realized I'm real mid at this point in time right now. You know what I mean? But let me say something too about the time. People talking about he ran 11:05. That 11:05 that everybody talks about, that's from a year ago. So he's, his time is going to obviously be better than that now. But again, at some point in time, guys, you got to stop obsessing over speed on the track that are you don't see context. Anyone can type in athletic.net or whatever and see a time. That doesn't mean that's all the times they have. This gets reported, and you got to look at when those things were done. This kid's playing in Orlando and he has no problems with speed. And look at that. I mean, you can only see the get off, but look at the get off though. Look how quick he is off the line. And that's the thing that you say, what makes you think that a kid that tall can play cornerback? It's the movement. He's an easy mover, right? So like, and the other thing too is even if he is only a 4.6, and let's just say for argument's sake, he's only a 4.6. What some of y'all have to understand is you've got to look at a 40 time differently for a guy like him than you do, just like we did for Cam Hart, than a guy who is 5'11". Because that 5'11" guy needs the speed to be in position.
Mm-hmm.
Guys like this who's 6'3", and I mean, you're talking about he's got about at least a 5 or 6 inch advantage over a 6 foot cornerback when it comes to his length, not just height, but just also the length because he's very long. And that's like, think about in a 40-yard dash, 5 or 6 inches is, half of a tenth of, I mean, that's like a 4.5 to a 4.55. That's it. That's only 5, 6 inches that's it. In a 40-yard dash. So that's the other thing, too, is that so that way in Cam Hart, did anybody ever question that Cam Hart had the speed to play in college? No, they didn't but he ran a 4.5 flat. It's far from being a burner. But when you're that long and you're instinctive, which I think I think Shaun, you're correct in that assessment, that's going to help you cover a lot of ground. But look how is he as explosive as Bubba Frazier? No, but for a 6'3" kid, look how quickly he gets downhill.
Change the direction.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. That's important. It's very important. Make that guard miss and get to the football. He's a very instinctive young man. I like the patience there. He knows he has help inside. He doesn't overplay it. Because this is football smarts. Because if he drives down, some guys just follow the ball. If he drives inside, that guy cuts outside of him. Yeah. He knows where his help is. So he stays outside. And then you see him help make the tackle. The one thing I do like is we do get to see him play some press man, which is good to see. You see that right there. Look at that length. I mean, he's all over that kid. Just no chance on that play, Shaun. No chance.
I actually like him in off man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because of his instincts.
Kind of why I like the field for him, the field position a little bit for him, because he can, like you said, he can stay off. He can kind of read things. He can get up underneath things. He can drive downhill. He can cover a lot of ground. Yeah. I mean, I think he can play both. And honestly, I'm not sure what Notre Dame prefers him as, whether they prefer him as a fielder or boundary. I don't know. So when I say this, I'm giving you my opinion, not Notre Dame's. That's why I'm with you, Shaun. I really like him in that field spot is because of the combination of instincts and range, and he can tackle. You got to be able to tackle to play that field spot. And he does a real nice job of that.
That's going to be interesting. Like I said, one of the things you think about is the instincts that he plays with. It's going to be interesting. I think once he gets on campus, how he reacts to what he's seeing. Mm-hmm. Right? Because it's always a transition. You hear when you talk to the freshmen after their first spring, after their first off season, you start to talk to them about what they really had to go through and learn about themselves, not just learning the playbook, not just learning what they're being asked to do. Like, who am I now? Because I'm no longer the best dude on the field every time I step on the field. Now, who am I? Who am I going to become, and what's going to be best for me? And then how they get into that and how they decide by their play where they're going to be allocated or possibly reallocated in the defense or in the position room. That's why I'm excited about a kid like this that has so many different areas that he could possibly go to. Like, what is he going, his work, what is that going to determine for the coaching staff and himself once he gets to Notre Dame? I'm excited to see how that, how that lays out.
Right here, you see some of the areas where he still needs to improve. His footwork, he's just kind of athletic right now. Like, his footwork needs a lot of work. You can see here, he's already leaning outside. He's already flipping his hips outside, thinking the guy's going to go outside, as opposed to just, stay in your pedal, stay square until he declares. He bites outside really early. So he should be beat here. But he's able to look how quickly he goes from leaning outside with his hips to turning inside and closing on this ball. That's an impressive athletic play. Now, that's not a good technical play. And honestly, like, if Noah Grubbs is the quarterback here, that's a touchdown. But the thing that I like, Shaun, is, me, the result I don't care as much about for high school tape. I got to see, do you have the physical tools? There's the technical stuff that needs to get cleaned up there. But what you see is two things. Number one, athleticism. Number two, this is the length I'm talking about. A 6-foot guy here is toast. He has no chance to get his hands on a football. He breaks that pass up, Shaun. Bad pedal, leans outside, doesn't close the way you'd think you need to close, and yet he's still able to get his hands on the football on a ball that's in front of the receiver because he's so long. And that's what I say. You got to reassess speed for a guy like this, because most 6'3" guys like this are not, like super explosive. They're more fluid. They're more smooth. A lot of the more explosive, twitchier guys are playing wide receiver because they're vertically fast, but they don't have the hips and the feet and things like that to play cornerback. And that's why those guys are a receiver. But he's a smooth athlete, Shaun. He's very smooth. He's not tight. Like, Cam had a little bit of hip tightness. I don't see that with this young man. I see more Leonard more in that regard than I see Cam Hart. And his film reminds me a lot of Leonard's too, because you really see his speed in the return game. That's when you really see his speed kind of really take off. Is like, you want to know what kind of speed this kid has, go watch him in the return game, and you're going to see, what kind of high end speed that he has. And we talked about that when we were breaking down Leonard Moore. Like, guys, this kid's faster than you think he is. Look at that. Because that was the question with Leonard, is like, he had an old 100-meter dash time that was like 12. I was like, can he run? I'm like, you want to know if he can run? Watch this clip right here. Watch him right here on offense or on special teams, and then you get a chance to see it. So that's what we like about him. Well, Shaun, let's dive into the what's next, because we got a lot we got to get to today. What's next at Notre Dame at cornerback? Obviously, there's several guys on the board. To the two main ones is Kerry Adams, and then, of course, Jazeel Hart. I think Kerry Adams is still a big-time target for Notre Dame. He's a top 50 overall type recruit. Elite speed, 6'1", very talented player on both sides of the ball. He's one of those kids, Shaun, that Notre Dame would take no matter what. He's a guy that can do a lot of different things. I think he also can play all three cornerback spots in Notre Dame defense. He's not a guy that I would completely rule out being a safety because of his skill set. I love him as a nickel. I mean, he's another guy that can play everywhere. But the reality is, the one thing that Kerry Adams has, is it Kerry or Kerry? I want to make sure I'm saying it. Is it
I've heard it both ways.
Okay.
I've literally heard it both ways. Okay. Yeah.
Let's go Kerry. The one thing he has is, compared to maybe some of the others, is he has true burner speed. And that's one of the reasons that I think Notre Dame views him as a must-get type of guy at the cornerback position. They like Jazeel Hart as well, as we've talked about. He's smart. He's instinctive. He's a lot of those things. And then, of course, people ask, well, what does this mean for Joey O'Brien? Nothing. Doesn't mean anything for Joey O'Brien, because Joey O'Brien is one of those guys that if Notre Dame had 6 DBs committed and Joey O'Brien wanted to come, Notre Dame's going to say, we'll take you. Because he's one of those, you never, there's always 4 or 5 guys like that in the class. and he's that for the defense. It's like it doesn't matter who's committed. If Joey O'Brien wants to wait until December to decide and he picks Notre Dame, they're taking him no matter what. Now, what it does kind of have an impact on a little bit is the position, but I don't think that is necessarily – I don't think it impacts it. If Joey O'Brien wants to play corner, they're going to give him a chance to play corner. I've never – from my understanding from different people I've talked to, and I've never talked to Joey, so just keep that in mind. But my understanding from talking to people close to him or people that know him, he doesn't really care as much about corner versus safety. He just wants to get on the field, and he just wants to play. I also think the success he had this spring playing safety in the 7-on-7s has him more comfortable with the idea that he may be a Kyle Hamilton type of safety. But he also is a guy that wants to potentially play some receiver. Now, Penn State's now pushing that with him because they know that they're trailing Notre Dame, so they're pulling out all the stops.
And they don't have any wide receivers.
That's right.
I'm just
no, that's all right. Mike Mickens is actually out in Pennsylvania today. He plans on stopping by LaSalle to check in on Joey O'Brien. So if you're on the message board, you'd have seen that post I put out of where they're going today. So he's out to see Joey O'Brien. It's not a coincidence that the first guy that Mike Mickens is going to see when this period opens back up is Joey O'Brien. That just tells you he might be the number one defensive player on the board regardless, but he is far, but because of his versatility, but he certainly, like I said, him and Kari Adams are take no matter what kind of guys, you know what I mean? And Joey's even more versatile than Aiden, in my opinion. So he's that kind of guy. As far as the corner, obviously Notre Dame's still recruiting Nick Reddish. There's a couple other guys on the board. I don't think Notre Dame is going to force the issue with numbers in this DB class. They'll take guys if they can get them, but if they miss out on some guys, I don't see them right now like feeling the need to panic and go get somebody. So Zach Fort recently announced he's kind of shutting down his recruitment. I don't think that they necessarily feel the need to we got to go replace him with somebody because the numbers are so good on the current depth chart of young players that if you think about the depth chart, you got Christian Gray who's a junior. Chance Tucker, who's going to be a senior this year, fifth-year senior. After that, literally everyone else in the depth chart is a true sophomore or true freshman. So school-wise, because obviously Carson Hobbs is he's a redshirt freshman, but he's sophomore in school. Very young depth chart. Same thing as safety. You've got Luke Towich, who's a junior. You've got a Don Schuler, who's a junior. Jalen Stroma, but then everybody else is freshman or sophomore. Bronte's a sophomore. Tabron Benny Powell's a sophomore. Trying to think. Obviously, you got your freshman class, Jadon Blair. You've got Ethan Long, Brandon Logan. So you've got a very young secondary. So I don't feel that Notre Dame feels the need that they have to load up on numbers in this class. Now, they will load up if it's dudes. So, if they take 6 guys in this class, it's because the bunch of dudes wanted to still come, and they're just not going to say no to them. But there's not the same need as you needed. But I do think they needed one more deep corner class. I actually do think that corner numbers are still a bit of a need because there's no guarantee that Christian Gray will still be on the team when these kids show up as freshmen. If Christian has a monster year this year, maybe he goes pro. But there's a really good chance that this corner class is going to only spend 1 year on a roster with Christian Gray and Leonard Moore. And that's 2026. Most likely they're both gone. And then after that, yes, you love Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary and Cree Thomas and Carson Hobbs, but none of them have proven anything yet. So you got to keep out there, keep going out and recruiting. So, and then, of course, you're also working with more than 85 scholarships now. So you don't have to be as numbers conscious as maybe you were in the past. So that's a little bit on the what's next, Shaun. But I did want to speak to the Joey O'Brien thing because I think a lot of people see Ayden Pouncey and think, well, he's just like Joey O'Brien. So does this hurt Joe O'Brien? But the final piece too, Shaun, and this is what you said earlier, and I want to kick this over to you. Football is still very much a sport where other dudes want to play with other dudes, where dudes want to play with other dudes. So when you see certain big-time players committing and, pay attention to some of the stuff you see from other recruits in the 26 and 27 class because they're like, what? Notre Dame got him? I didn't even know that Notre Dame was even a major contender for that kid. And you start to see it. You see Javion Osborne multiple times to some of the recent commitments. Really? Okay. And so I think those are things that you look at and start paying attention a little bit to that, Shaun, because it speaks volumes. Because usually when big time players commit somewhere or talented players commit somewhere, you get certain reactions from players because they're like, okay, Notre Dame is doing something. And that's why certain teams fill up and are top 2 or 3 every year, because other players see that and they're like, hey, I want to be part of what they're building right now.
Everything means something. Like, everything that happens means something, even if it doesn't lead to a young man ultimately choosing Notre Dame. And so you pointed out Zach Ford. You want to know how well things are going in recruiting for the defensive backfield? A committed player from Georgia chose on his own dime to make a visit during the spring to Notre Dame. Even though he shut it down and said, I'm still remaining with Georgia, that says something. Mm. That says something in the eyes of the elite. Notre Dame is worth a look. Like, okay, I need to pay attention to what's going on. I like them, but they didn't have certain things at the time. Now they have those things. Now they have more of my attention. Let me go see whether or not this is worthwhile, whether or not it's worth me decommitting and possibly giving a deeper look and taking an official visit. All of those things, it didn't end up in Notre Dame flipping the kid or getting him to decommit, but it's putting everyone on notice like, hey, kids are now thinking a lot more about Notre Dame nationally and within the top 100 than they were previously. It's the same way where we would say, man, they couldn't even get their kid on campus. That's saying something about where Notre Dame still is from a recruiting standpoint, because you have to be able to at least get those kids on campus for you to start feeling like you're starting to eat up ground or eating up what's left over as gap closers in recruiting. And so you're starting to see that distance being eaten up, because you're seeing guys like a Zach Ford that doesn't end up in Notre Dame, but he makes that visit. That means something. You're starting to see other top recruits very quietly come in to take a visit, and then people find out about it, and it's like, oh, they
didn't even know he was coming.
I didn't even know he was coming. Yeah. Those are the type of stories that we feel like you're going to hear more. They're going to become more normal, because Notre Dame is starting to close the gap from a recruiting standpoint. And of course, it's correlated to what we said for the last 2 years. If Notre Dame can win, they haven't won the national championship, but if they can win, you're going to start to see the effort and the work that the staff has been putting in. Now you're going to see it come to fruition, because it's going to start to line up, right? And now they're going to close the mouths of the ops, per se, the people that negative recruit Notre Dame, that say and tell these players from Florida, from the South, why would you go up there? You're not going to get drafted. They can't develop you. They can't get you into the first and second round. You're not going to be in a national championship game. Where now all of those excuses are, it's almost like B Rabbit, right, in the movie Eminem. Like, I've said everything myself. Now what? Now tell everybody else something they don't know.
Yeah, I know everything you're about to say about me, right? Yeah. Now you're left with what? It's cold there.
Exactly.
Okay. All right. That's the weather sucks. Now you're back to that, and that's all you got left. And Notre Dame's Lou Holtz always used this when I was told that his staff would always talk about, well, you know, you're going to tell the Packers or Bears or, you know, whoever that you're not going to play for them if they draft you because it's cold. You know what I mean? But when you're left, that's all you got left now. Yeah, but it's cold there. You got to really work hard in the classroom. Okay. Well, you weren't going to get that kid anyway if that's something that he knew. And if he didn't know, he probably wasn't going to end up at Notre Dame anyway, if you didn't know that. So, Shaun, that's going to do it for our Aiden Pouncey breakdown. Big commitment for Notre Dame. It's a big one, literally and figuratively. Notre Dame able to dip into Florida for another commitment. You're seeing a strategy where Notre Dame is putting a lot of emphasis on a few key states. Obviously, Texas being one, North Carolina being one, Georgia being one, and then, of course, Florida. And Florida's been interesting for Notre Dame in the past, Shaun, because they either do like they've said, okay, we're going to recruit that state. And then they've gotten a lot of kids over the years that maybe really didn't fit at Notre Dame. It was always a struggle to kind of keep them where they needed to be and going to class and doing things the right way. And then they just would stop recruiting state altogether because of those issues. And I think what this staff has done is like, look, we have to be able to recruit state of Florida. We just have to make sure we find the young men that fit here and understand that. And so that you see that with Dallas Golden. That's a different type of young man. You see that with Ayden Pouncey. That's a different type of young man. You see that with the people, their support system at home is a lot different than maybe what we have seen in the past. And I think those things matter where this staff understands we can't ignore Florida just because maybe it's a little harder for us to get kids and keep kids from that state. We just got to be smart about it and understand sometimes we're going to lose those kids. We're going to have the Keon Keeley's flip every now and then. This is part of recruiting with the big boys. But when you find kids that really get this place, like Dallas Golden, like Noah Grubbs, like Ayden Pouncey, I don't want to say Dylan Faison because that's a little bit different, because you've got the family connection and all that. He obviously gets Notre Dame. And then there's the lacrosse aspect of it. He's a 5-star lacrosse player. Notre Dame's the back-to-back national champions in lacrosse. A little different deal with him. But just the pure football guys, it's finding those right fits and then getting them. And so you're seeing more emphasis in Texas. You're seeing more emphasis in North Carolina where they have, I think, 3 commitments from that state right now. You're seeing more emphasis in Florida where they now have 3 commits from. And they're hoping to land multiple kids from Texas left. They obviously want Caden Finley. They want Braden Robinson on offense. They obviously want to be able to get Tiki Hola on defense. And you're seeing guys from Georgia, and you're seeing more North Carolina. I mean, there's still more North Carolina guys on the board. Xavier Griffith-Haynes on the D-line. You're seeing, obviously, Nick Reddish at safety. And we've talked about Noah Clark at defensive tackle. So there's still guys on the board. You talk about California with Kerry Wilder. They're still trying to get him. You look at the state of Florida. There's still guys on the board in the state of Florida that they're trying to get. So, and then you look at the NFL draft this past weekend, and you see how every year those states just load up with kids being drafted from those states. And Notre Dame is making a play to be more involved and smartly involved in those states. But when you make a concerted effort on Texas, and then you just say, well, we're just not going to recruit Florida and California, you're missing out. Be selective and smart in those states, but you still got to recruit them and find the kids that fit you. If you ignore California, knowing you're not going to get many kids from there, then you miss out on Kingston, Viliama Asa, and Madden Faremo. If you just recruit Florida, you just ignore Florida because it's tough, then you miss out on the Dallas Goldens. You miss out on the Ayden Pounceys. You miss out on the Noah Grubbses. And the same thing is true in Texas. If you just say, hey, well, it's hard to beat Texas for kids and all, then you miss out on the Jaden Greathouses and Leonard Moores and Kedron Youngs and Jadarian Prices and all Javion Osborns and guys like that who they're trying to get. Tiki Holas who they're trying to get. So you got to be smart. Make sure you find the right kids that fit Notre Dame. And we've said this all along, Shaun. There's more kids than you realize that are Notre Dame fits. You just got to give them a reason to come. And that's why you're seeing the successes, because the on-field product is starting to be more attractive to these young men. The off-the-field stuff's always been there, but now the on-field product's getting there, and that's having a huge impact. So just wanted to leave that little tidbit before we move on, folks. Before we get to that next section, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast. We would greatly appreciate that. If you're listening via podcast platform, give us a 5-star review. But of course, as always, Shaun, if you want the intel, you want to know what's going on, make sure you sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So, Shaun, this weekend wasn't just an Ayden Pouncey. We could just say, show's over. Let's do the mailbag. But we had some other stuff going on this weekend. There was a draft Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, Shaun. And I know you and I always enjoy talking about the draft and evaluating the draft. And Notre Dame had 6 players taken in this year's draft, which is actually, I believe, 1 more than last year's draft, Shaun, if I remember correctly. I'm going to look at this. I think they had 7 last year, if I remember correctly. Let me just go ahead and look at that real quick. Let me pull up drafthistory.com and look at Notre Dame. They had, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yes. So Joe Alt, Blake Fisher, Maris Leofau, Cam Hart, J.D. Bertrand, Audric Estime, Javante Jean-Baptiste. So they had 7 last year, 6 this year. So actually fewer than a year ago. And we're going to talk about, those players being taken. And we saw something happen this weekend, Shaun, this past week that we hadn't seen at Notre Dame in a very long time. Matter of fact, the last time it had happened was 1993. What was it that happened? You had 2 Notre Dame defensive backs being taken in the first 3 rounds of the same draft. The last time that happened was Tom Carter and Willie Clark back in 1993. You've had DBs on an entire secondary get drafted, but it's like Tom Carter one year, Jeff Burris the next year, Bobby Taylor the next year. It was never in the same draft. And if Xavier Watts would have gotten drafted in the second round, like he should have, then it would have been the first time Notre Dame has ever had 2 DBs taken in the first 2 rounds. So if that tells you that this may not seem like a great accomplishment to some people, but this is just not something that happens very often in Notre Dame. So like how you evaluate this draft is all about your perspective. What's your perspective going in? And you look at the first 2 players being taken. You had Benjamin Morrison going 53rd overall to the Buccaneers, Xavier Watts going 96th in round 3 to the Falcons. We'll get into those specifically. But first, big picture, I thought it was important to point out that. But I also want to point out also that now every starter at linebacker from the 2022 and 2023 linebacker room got drafted in the 5th round or better. Because JD got drafted in the 5th round, Maris got drafted in the 3rd round, and Jack Kaiser this past weekend also got drafted in the 4th round, early 4th round. I think he was the 4th overall pick of the 4th round. He got picked by the Jacksonville Jaguars. So Notre Dame, obviously, on defense the last couple of years has had a lot of guys get picked. And Riley Mills, who will talk more specific about the players, first D tackle for Notre Dame to get drafted since 2019. So you're starting to see things that people can spin it. Oh, it's this. But when you're seeing things happen in the program all in the same year that you haven't seen in certain times, I mean, now that things are rolling when those type of things happen. I haven't looked to see the last time the Notre Dame had a starting linebacker core that they all got drafted, but I know it's been a while because when you think back to like the 2020 draft or 2020 team, Drew White didn't get drafted. Shane Simon didn't get drafted. When you look at like the 2018 linebacker core, which was great in college, but Tavon didn't get drafted. Tavon Coney didn't get drafted. Dan Fox didn't get drafted beside Manti. Joe Schmidt didn't get drafted beside Jalen Schmidt. So like it's been a long time since your entire starting linebacker room got drafted. You go back to the 2005 season, I believe Corey Mays and Brandon Hoyt both got drafted, but the other linebacker, Mo Crum, did not. I don't believe Mo Crum got drafted. So it's been a while. I know that since Notre Dame's had their entire starting linebacker room from a team get drafted. Starting linebacker room. So just some pretty cool accomplishments, in my opinion, Shaun, that say a little bit about kind of where this thing is trending, especially what was the side of the ball that carried Notre Dame the last couple of years? It's defense.
Yeah.
You're starting to see that in the NFL draft.
Well, I think the interesting big picture view of this is that most people will make mention of their opponent in the national championship game and how the draft specifically early on went for them in contrast to what they faced from Notre Dame. And the low-hanging fruit will be, see, in order to win it, we're going to have to do this, or we're going to have to be like them. Where I look at the inverse of it as, see, when you actually know how to coach and develop what you have, that might be what lazy people that are scouting aren't particularly looking for, then you can get the outcome that Notre Dame was able to give you, right? And so I do think from a purist standpoint, scouts that are purists, that dive into film, that build their evaluations off of film and production, will always love Notre Dame players. Like Notre Dame is not going to get and load up on guys that are just going to wow you at the combine. That, is there a day where they kind of close that gap and they might have 3 or 4 guys go to the combine and wow you in the next couple of years? It might happen.
It's been funny, Shaun? It's funny? What's the position on this team other than quarterback where people complain the most about Notre Dame's lack of athleticism?
Yeah.
It's wide receiver.
Yeah.
That's the one position where Notre Dame is dominated when they have guys go to the combine. Miles Boykin blew up the combine. Chase Claypool blew up the combine. Will Fuller blew up the combine. Even Kevin Austin blew up the combine. He went undrafted. But the thing, I'll say this before we dive into the specifics of the players. I still think that Notre Dame is dealing with a little bit of a I'm just going to be honest. NFL scouts and NFL teams are just as fallible as all of us. I still think we're seeing a little bit of a stigma about Notre Dame players that has yet to completely be washed away. And I think it fits into kind of what you're saying is like, do they really love football? Are they really athletic guys? Are they just smart, try-hard kids? And you're starting to see some of those things get answered with certain testing numbers. But then these kids come along like a Xavier Watts, like a Kyle Hamilton, who don't blow you away with elite testing times, although Kyle had some very good explosive numbers. He just didn't have any real good speed numbers. And I think as the NFL, we're going to try to talk about this a little bit more later, depending on how we are with time. But I still think that there's too many of the analytics and the combine stuff that is knocking these guys down a little bit. And I think that's hurt them. And I think, look, let's be honest too, the injuries impacted where Notre Dame players get drafted. If Benjamin Morrison's the number 53 overall pick with a very significant injury, didn't get drafted that far behind Will Johnson, who also fell to the second round because of injuries, I got to think he's probably a first-round pick. I got to think he goes before the kid from Kentucky if he doesn't have those injury issues. And then Riley Mills. I mean, Riley Mills was the number 4 pick of the 5th round. I have to think if he's not – I mean, he's a guy that's probably not going to be ready to start the season because of the knee injury. I have to think that he's maybe a round 3 guy, round 4 at the latest, if it's not for that. So those things.
A lot of people think he's just going to –
also has some significant injury history in the past as well. So some of these guys that Notre Dame had going to the draft this year had some injury red flags that dropped their grade down a little bit, and that has to be considered as well when you're looking at where they were taken.
Speaking of Riley Mills, I think, who did he go to again? I'm sorry.
Seahawks.
He went to the Seahawks. The Seahawks right there, they're putting him, they're stashing him. This is like a red shirt year for him. They're not expecting him.
Because they've got Leonard Williams, Aaron Reed.
This is a stash year. Get him ready, get him healthy. We've seen enough. His film was enough. What he did this year was enough. And for me, like you said, measurables, all of that, was he impacted by not being able to go to the combine and like prove measurables? Because as an evaluator, you look at the tape, you look at the progression, and you say, with the production, man, those type of sack numbers from the interior,
right?
I'll take that, right? But you don't get a chance to see him,
right?
So that impacts, and we'll talk about that.
I think I had it. I looked it up. I believe he was 6th in win rate, pass rush win rate, according to Pro Football Focus this year. And his 2023 pass rush win rate was even better in 2023. The difference this year is he got to the quarterback more. So, like you said, Shaun, like the numbers, the 6'5", 300-plus pounds, you get a chance to see him test it all. Because remember, Riley Mills is a guy that was on Bruce Feldman's freaks list because of his athleticism and strength, and he didn't get to put that on display because of the knee injury. So I'm very curious how that's going to do. Let's kind of run down through these, Shaun, and we'll go first to last and just talk about where they got picked and just kind of give some thoughts on each player and go from there. So the first player taken was Benjamin Morrison, who was drafted by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with the number 53 overall pick. This is the highest a Notre Dame cornerback has been drafted since Tom Carter went in the first round back in 1993. I believe, if my numbers are correct, they've only had one corner even taken in round 2 since then, but I could be wrong on that because I keep feeling like Allen Rossum was actually a 3rd-round pick. But I don't think they've even had, because like Kavari Russell was a 3rd-round pick. They've had some guys going round 3, but for some reason I felt like Allen Rossum was also a 3rd-round pick. So the last time Notre Dame had a corner go on round 1 or 2 was Tom Carter back in the 1993 draft. He went number, I think, 17 or so overall to the Redskins. Since then, now Bobby Taylor was a 2nd-round pick 2 years later, but Bobby Taylor played corner at Notre Dame his last year, but he was drafted as a safety by the Eagles. He went round 2. So, but even if you want to get technical, he played corner. Then it's since Bobby Taylor in 1995 that Notre Dame has had a cornerback drafted as high as the second round. If you're going to say someone who played corner at Notre Dame, because Bobby played both, played safety early in his career and then moved to corner later in his career. So you could say either 93 for a guy that was drafted as a corner or 95 for a guy that played corner is the last time that Notre Dame has had a cornerback be drafted this high, which again just says a lot about where this thing is going. And by the way, Bobby Taylor was taken on pick number 50, so right around where Benjamin Morrison was taken. Yeah. That's impressive company to be in, Shaun.
Well, I just think Benjamin Morrison and, you know, everything surrounding him, in my opinion, kind of speaks to where Notre Dame is headed, right? You look at Cam Hart, who he looked up to during his time when he played opposite of Cam Hart, and you look at where Cam Hart was drafted, and now you see Notre Dame begin to take that step closer to the first round with Benjamin Morrison. And this is Benjamin Morrison that wasn't able to play. This is Benjamin Morrison that wasn't, he didn't go to the combine. And I think a lot, the emotion that you saw from Benjamin Morrison encapsulates everything that he endured and went through. I think in that moment, it was just kind of a release. Because when you don't get a chance to prove two teams physically what you can do. He had his own private workout, but I'm sure that was pretty much scripted.
They said, Shaun, that there was like 20 to 25 scouts there.
Yeah.
Which means not every NFL team even attended his private workout.
Absolutely.
Their boards were already set.
Absolutely. And so when you see that type of emotion pour out, you know, that is a kid almost being at the mercy of these evaluators and these scouts, and it's really out of his hands because he could not play. He didn't have a chance to make that playoff run and show against the best of the best who he really was. And so now you're just, you know, you go from being that guy preseason and pretty much being locked in to late first round, maybe early second round to, man, the unknown.
Right.
And it just had to really be emotionally weighty for him and his family. And so what you saw pour out of him was, I made the right decision. Because I'm sure he was questioning, did I make the right decision not to come back, not to play?
I know I would have.
Yeah.
Something tells me that Benjamin Morrison wasn't really thinking about that because he's different than you and I are.
Yeah.
Which is why he's where he is.
Yeah.
You know, like he had a belief that I can do this.
Yeah. Oh,
but to your point, like it's hard for me to fathom him not thinking to me. Part of me says it wouldn't shock me if I found out Benjamin didn't think about that at all. But it's hard for me to fathom someone not thinking about that because of, like, shoot, I'm sitting there thinking, like, man, I wonder what Blake Fisher's thinking right now, looking at all some of these tackles that were taken in the first round. Like, what if he? But some of these kids, like, they have a belief in themselves, and it doesn't really matter. And when you saw Benjamin's emotional reaction, Shaun, I love that you pointed to that because you said this had to be an addition. It's a stressful. You talk to any of the parents that are going through it. This is a stressful period of time because, like you said, there's so much uncertainty. Because when they're going into college, I pick wherever I want to go. I can go wherever I want. You know, if all the schools have offered me, I get to pick where I want to go. Now it's like I don't know. Like, and if they don't want me, I don't get to play. And the process for him, you know, because especially nowadays it's kind of broken up over a couple of days. It's not like, you know, in the past he would have waited a couple hours to hear his name. Now it's a whole day. But you see a guy like Benjamin Morrison get picked at 53. You see that emotion, just that relief. It's a dream accomplished. And think of all the work. And this is a young man that's been told you're not that good for how long? I mean, how many? The recruiting services didn't think he was that good. You know, like, oh, he's at Notre Dame. He's not this. He's not that. He's not athletic. He's not. You know what helped Benjamin Morrison a lot is I think a lot of the analytics people, some of the scouting people, I don't think they fell in love with Benjamin Morrison. I think Benjamin Morrison got pick number 53 because this is one of those ones where the football people said, okay, miss me with all that. Here's what I know. I watched this kid 2 years in a row lock down Marvin Harrison Jr. I saw this kid lock down Jordan Addison. I saw this kid lock down Zay Flowers. So I don't know what his 40 time is, but I know Zay Flowers couldn't run past him. I don't know what his 40 time is, but I know Marvin Harrison Jr. couldn't run past him. I think this is a football people decision is why I think Benjamin went that high. Because you started hearing some like rumblings about whether or not this team's even had him on their board because of the injuries. I think football people stepped in and said, you're getting a first-round talent at 53. We'll take that chance. We'll take that chance because the film is legit. And it wasn't done against a bunch of triple. This kid, like I said, in 2 years in matchups against Marvin Harrison Jr. had 2 catches for 26 yards against Benjamin Morrison. Benjamin Morrison had more breakups against Marvin Harrison than Marvin Harrison had catches against Benjamin Morrison. He did the same thing to Zay Flowers. He did the same thing to Alec Ayo Manor. Shut him down in 2023, and they didn't attempt one pass against him this year for Stanford. Not one time did Stanford throw at him in what turned out to be the last game of his career. So there's game after game after game in his career of him just locking down dudes that are playing in the NFL now, some of which were high draft picks. Because 2 of those guys I mentioned, Zay Flowers went to the Ravens in the first round as well, correct? Didn't he? Wasn't he a first-round pick last year?
Yeah.
So there's 2 first-round picks in last year's draft that Benjamin Morrison put the clamps on. That's when the football people step in and say, we're taking this kid because I know what the film tells me. The analytics may tell you one thing, the medicals may tell you another thing, but that's true in the first round. We're now in the second round. We're taking the best football player, and this kid's the best football player. So the Buccaneers got 2 first-round draft picks, in my opinion, in the first 2 rounds by getting a Emeka Egbuka, which I thought was a great – they didn't really have a need a receiver, in my opinion, but sometimes the kid's just like, how do we not draft that guy at 19? Like he shouldn't have fallen that far. And then you get a kid like this in the second round, you got 2 first-round talents. Now, looking at the Buccaneers too, Shaun, from what I've read, they're going to, looks like one of their corners is going to get moved on from. And he's a kid that there's a shot if Benjamin's healthy, he could come in and, like Cam Hart did last year, earn a starting job at some point in time his rookie year. If he's healthy. That's going to be the question mark, if he's healthy.
And I think the interaction goes to what you said. Head coach, his background is teaching the secondary. That's what he came up the ranks, coaching and teaching secondary. And Todd Bowles, when he says, "Coach, I'm not gonna let you down," you could tell that was a really. It was almost like, okay, there's something deeper here from a relationship standpoint. Like this pick was almost personal. It was very much board related, film related, but it also had kind of a personal. On both sides, a personal feel to it, to where it's like, I'm not gonna let you down. And Todd Bowles' reaction was, I know you're not. I know. And I think the symmetry between him and Will Johnson. I just think if they both were healthy, they were gonna go right behind each other in the draft. Wherever Will Johnson went, Ben was gonna be right behind him.
Or depending on if
Ben flip.
I still say Will Johnson may be the better prospect because of the height and the speed. Benjamin Morrison's been the better player. And you want evidence of that? Go look how they produced in every game where they played the same team. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. went for over 100 yards against Will Johnson. He couldn't do anything against Benjamin Morrison. Yeah. Best catch he made against Benjamin was out of bounds. Remember that back shoulder he caught against Benjamin, but Benjamin rode him out of bounds?
Yeah.
So, but Will has the measurables over Benjamin. I could have seen if they were both healthy, some team that just wants to go out there and play a lot of man coverage that would say, hey, we like Benjamin better. But to your point, though, those 2 kids are first-round picks if it's not for medical concerns.
Yeah.
And that's what the Buccaneers got with that pick.
Yeah.
So, that's going to be a very interesting take. So, second Notre Dame player taken was Xavier Watts, who was taken with the number 96 overall pick, which is in the 3rd round, getting close to the bottom of the 3rd round. I was very surprised he fell as far as he did. I believe there's really 2 primary reasons. One is he's not an elite tackler yet. He's a way better tackler than the guy they got in the next round, Billy Bowman. But I think it really comes down to he ran a mid 4.5 at the combine, at the pro day. And I think that's something that hurt him. It's the same reason Kyle Hamilton fell, and he doesn't have the measurables at 6'4" to make up for it. But the Atlanta Falcons got an absolute steal late in the 3rd round You got two potentially elite pass rushers in round 1. We'll see. And then you get Xavier Watts in round 3. They let go. They did not re-sign Justin Simmons this offseason. They have Jordan Fuller slated right now to start opposite of Jesse Bates, who's a really good player. I think this is one of those deals where it would not shock me, again, if Xavier Watts comes in, picks up the defense quickly, and ends up as a starter for the Falcons pretty early on in his career. I think this is a great value pick for the Falcons, and from everything I've read, at a position where there was needs. And clearly they felt they had need at safety because they drafted him, and then the very next pick I believe they made was Billy Bowman from Oklahoma, who I think is a safety that could also maybe play some in the slot as well. So clearly they felt it was a need, and I have a feeling Xavier's another kid that's going to step in and play. Because at the end of the day, Shaun, like that's getting drafted high matters, and these are decently high draft picks. Third round is nothing to sneeze at. That's still quite an accomplishment.
High percentage rate of starters and all pros.
Exactly.
1 through 3. Yeah.
Exactly. But it's like you're still going to get kind of paid pretty well. But if you can get a guy like to come in and start right away in round 3, that's great value. And I think the Falcons got great value here by getting. He's the best safety in the draft class as far as just who was the better player in college. He's clearly the best safety in the draft class. But obviously teams are going to fall in love with like the kid from South Carolina, and they're going to fall in love with Malachi Starks because Malachi has some pretty good film too. Don't get me wrong, but they can see the faster 40 time, and he's taller and he's thicker and all this other kind of stuff. At the end of the day, Xavier Watts got doubted by the NFL for the same reason he got doubted by the recruiting services. When we kept trying to tell y'all this is a top 100 football player. Yeah, but he's not a burner. He's not this. I understand all that, but he's a freaking football player. And this is another one that I believe is most likely one of those football people said, okay, you may like this guy because of what he did in shorts, but here's what I like this guy. The film, the tape tells me this. And I think they both got steals. And I'm not just saying that as a Notre Dame fan, because I'll be willing to say, like, hey, I don't know if that guy's going to do that. I'm telling you, these guys are, in my opinion, are going to be steals. I don't watch a whole lot of it now, but I've watched a lot of NFL in my life, and I've seen a lot of guys that weren't as talented as these two kids have pretty nice long careers in the National Football League. It's just going to be for Benjamin, it's just going to be about health. That's really what's going to come down to, is just being able to be healthy.
I'm going to say something interesting concerning Xavier Watts, and I truly believe this, but I think it speaks to a bigger issue that we might get to later in the show. Xavier Watts came back, rightly so, became a better football player, in my opinion, became a better leader on the back end than he was. And I think if he had come out last year, he probably gets drafted in the exact same spot.
Possibly.
I don't think he gets drafted any lower if he come because of the buzz coming off of winning. There are so many different things that matter. I don't think there's like a huge discrepancy where if he comes out last year and he's a 5th rounder.
I think so just so we're clear, the buzz his camp was getting last year was 3rd round was the ceiling.
Right.
Most of what he was hearing was 4 and 5 is what he was hearing. That's part of what factored into it. But I don't know, because it just takes one team to fall in love with you.
That's why I still believe one team would have fallen in love
possibly
with him last year.
Here's the only reason, Shaun, I'm not as confident as you are, is because number one, he only has the 1 year of good tape. And 2, his testing numbers would have been the exact same.
Right.
But to your point, and this is what I think you're saying, maybe he doesn't get drafted any higher. But part of the reason Xavier, his decision to come back was he didn't think his game was ready to thrive. And Xavier's thought process was this, and this is what shows you why he's such a smart kid. His thing is, okay, yes, I get, because what he was being told by some people around him is like, look, you get there as early as possible and then get to that second contract. And as a guy that's not in the 1st round, you only got to wait 4 years to get that second contract, where 1st round guys sometimes tend to have to wait till 5 because you have that 5th the year 5 option in the NFL. But his thing was, but he gave you the mature answers. I understand that, but I'd rather get to the NFL more ready to play and dominate.
Oh, absolutely.
And play at a high level. And I need another year to be that. And I think it was the smart decision. I
totally agree with that.
Agree to disagree.
I'm just giving you.
But my point is, he doesn't get drafted that much lower, even if he does get lower. It's not like he went from 7th to 3rd.
No.
I would argue he's probably a 4th round pick last year. That's not a huge difference in round 4 to round 3. But he's so much more prepared to, because like you and I have talked about this in the show, Shaun. His game is so much better this year than it was last year. Last year was all about the picks.
Mm-hmm.
He still had a lot of picks this year. The difference, however, he had more breakups this year. But the difference is his overall game. His tackling got better. His coverage got better.
Yeah.
His angle to the football got better. Like everything about his game got better. And he had a year as a captain under his belt too, where he was forced to, hey, you have to be a leader now. We don't have JD anymore.
Right.
We don't have DJ anymore. We don't have, Cam anymore. You have to step up and lead now. And he did. And he was a better player for it.
Let me counter just a little bit. And I think we have evidence of it. If he comes out last year, he doesn't play in the bowl game, and he takes the same amount of time that Maris and those guys took off. He probably goes to the Senior Bowl. He probably impresses at the Senior Bowl, like most Notre Dame guys do. And now that impacts how he's viewed. See, though, he didn't. Now you get the long playoff run, right? He probably tests a little bit better preparing and having time to prepare last year than he did this year, coming off that long playoff run. Yeah. He has to be dinged up. There's no way. There's no way he went through that gauntlet of the playoffs and wasn't dinged up. Everybody was dinged up.
Well, even if it was just being tired, Shaun.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Let me see I think he had played almost 1,000 snaps this year. Played 970 snaps this year. The next highest guy for Notre Dame was Christian Gray at 796.
Yeah.
There wasn't anybody in 800s, much less than 900s, and he was almost to 1,000.
So
Whereas the year, just give you this quick number, Shaun, so you can finish your point and you have the data to further. He played 262 more snaps this year than he played the year before, which is like 4.5 to 5 games worth of extra snaps that he had to play this year.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, I think, and maybe it goes to your point that stigma still exists, in a way, but how does this, you come back and you become a better player and it puts you in a better position.
Yeah.
When you go to the next level, that's the greater of it. Right. And, we benefited from it as a team. We benefited from it as a fan base. Mm-hmm. Of course, that's evident by the season they had. But in the long run, when you have a decision like that, right, you have to sit there and say, how much better am I going to become as a player? And then how much better am I going to be from a draft position? And if that stigma exists, then it almost takes that conversation away, because it's almost like the stigma is the stigma until it's broken. Mm-hmm. So there really is not going to be that much movement. So now it is about me making sure that I'm the best that I need to be as a player before I go to the NFL. Yeah.
And I'm happy for the young man. I've gotten to know that family a little bit over the years. That's a pretty awesome group of people. It really is. And the best part is, did you see Xavier's reaction getting drafted? It was this. That's what he did when he got drafted.
Yeah, the team was like, yo, we didn't see you smile when you came in for your visit.
Like, that's Xavier. That's who he is. Because you know what he's thinking? He's like, okay, let's get to work. He's thinking like, all right, this is what I got to do, and I got to do this. He's probably already thinking about like what his workout's going to look like the next morning. Like if you know Xavier Watts at all, that's just who he is. And it's like I told somebody, I said, look, Notre Dame made him wait 3 years before they finally gave him a shot. The NFL only made him wait for a few more hours. That's it. You know, he'll be fine. I think so. I want to say this last thing before we move on to the next player, Shaun, which is Jack Kaiser. How well Benjamin Xavier perform in the next couple years, along with what we're seeing from Cam Hart, is going to be impactful for Notre Dame in the draft. Once guys go and start producing, then you start getting some of the – why do Alabama players get the benefit of the doubt? It's for certain reasons. Why do certain players over here get benefit of the doubt? It's for certain reasons. A lot of times – certain schools get the benefit of the doubt because guys from that school tend to come to the NFL and perform. And that kind of trumps maybe some, well, hey, you know what, we didn't take this guy because of that. We didn't take that guy because of that. But, you know, look, Cam Hart started as a rookie, played pretty well in the games I watched. That's the only NFL games I really watched last year was Cam. You know, Kyle Hamilton is, I believe, was an all-pro or Pro Bowl, at least a Pro Bowler, right? I'm not sure if he was an all-pro. I'd have to look that up here real quick. You know, but he's obviously backing up first-round pick. I mean, from everything I've read, I haven't seen a whole lot of Ravens games, but, yeah, he was a second-team All-Pro this year, first-team All-Pro in his first year. He's been a two-time Pro Bowler. So, yeah, he's been in the NFL 2 years, and he's made, 3 years? 3 years, and he's made the All-Pro twice. So you start seeing that success, and then it's like, okay, now you have more comfort taking some of these Notre Dame players where for a long time you weren't taking Notre Dame DBs because they just didn't translate to the NFL. So that's big. Next pick on the we're getting a little theme here of the Notre Dame defense, Shaun. Next pick was Jack Kaiser, who was just outside of the third round, Shaun. I believe he was the fourth overall pick of the fourth round. He went number 107 overall to the Jacksonville Jaguars. Very interesting selection for the Jaguars, who seem to be set at starting linebacker right now. This is a young man you're bringing in for two reasons. One, depth at linebacker. Number two, he's going to be a special team stalwart right away. And then if he pans out and can play linebacker for you, then when one of these linebackers becomes a free agent, you're ready to move on. But, you know, this is another player, tons of experience, leader and all that. But the reason Jack Kaiser got picked this early, which is early fourth round, is A, he's a much better athlete than people realized, and B, I mean, the kid, like you said, I love what you said, like Notre Dame players like almost always go to the Senior Bowl and impress. He's another one of those guys that went to the Senior Bowl, which was like a week after the national title game. And he's like, no, I'm doing everything. I'm here to work. I'm here to play. I think that caught a lot of people's eyes. And then when he runs the way he runs, you're like, okay, you understand why people liked him. And this is about where I saw all the mock drafts had him as like a round 4 to round 5 guy. So this is kind of that range where he was expected to go. And he went at the very top of his ceiling, which is very early in round 4, Shaun.
I think he benefits from those guys that he played with as well, right? Because I think last year, you see, Maris was definitely drafted ahead of where we thought he was going to go. But once again, him and JD went to the Senior Bowl and impressed. It's like people were like, yo, they're better in person than we see on film and the few times we saw them play in person at Notre Dame. So I think that within itself has some guys thinking like we've already evaluated this kid when we evaluated JD, when we evaluated Maris. And it's like now we're going and looking at games and we're seeing the talent he's playing with. And it's not like he's far behind them. He's right there.
And more versatile. Because he's played out of the box and
absolutely.
In the box. Right.
So all of that kind of tied into him. There were probably teams that thought about him. This is the interesting thing. Wherever a kid gets drafted, more than likely there are teams in front of him, probably 5 to 10 picks in front, that considered that particular individual. It's just all about different boards and different war rooms, right? So he probably was considered for a late third round. He probably had late third round consideration for certain teams.
You don't draft a guy the 4th overall pick in the 4th round, and no one even remotely thought about taking him from the middle point on of the third.
So that speaks volumes. He was a third round consideration, in my opinion. which means the guys that he played with that are the younger guys are going to start being second round consideration, early third round consideration. So once again, incrementally, Notre Dame is starting to inch its way up that draft board at a position, and we're seeing it just like we're seeing it at defensive back. We're starting to see it at linebacker. So that, once again, everything matters. Jack Kaiser, where he was drafted, matters. His performance in the Senior Bowl matters.
Yeah. You and again, I want to repeat the stat I gave earlier. All three starting linebackers from the 22 and 23 start from the Notre Dame defense, because they were all three starters for 2 years in a row together. Jack was technically a 4-year starter at Notre Dame. This was his first year inside. They all went in the top 5 rounds. So all of them got drafted. Maris was the highest drafted of the third, which is funny because he's probably the third. I would rank the third as far as effective in college of the three. They were all good players, but I'd probably rank Maris third. I'd say JD was probably 1 and Jack was 2. Maris, but how they got drafted was like the reverse order is the best college player got picked last and the best athlete got picked first. And then Jack's kind of right in the middle, but a little better athlete than JD, not as big and long as Maris. Here's a stat for you before we move on to the next guy, Shaun. Jack Kaiser in his Notre Dame career obviously set a Notre Dame record for most games played with 69 because of the COVID year. You can thank the COVID year for that because Jack Kaiser in 2020 played 165 defensive snaps, special team snaps, and also in 2020 played 129 defensive snaps. He was a part of the rotation, and then, of course, in 21 and the next 4 years, he was the starting rover for the next 3 years, I should say, and then this past year moved inside to Will. And he played over 600 snaps. But Jack Kaiser played 1,862 career snaps on defense. He played 975 career snaps on special teams. Like, this is a kid that's played a lot of football for Notre Dame. And that last number, that's why Jack Kaiser, in my opinion, got picked where he got picked. You're getting a high-character young man. You're getting a worker. You're getting a leader. You're getting a guy that just kind of does everything you want him to do, but he's also athletic. But he's also a guy that has experience playing on all the Notre Dame special teams. And when you look at, like, for example, the Pro Football Focus numbers he's played in his career, he played 87 snaps on kick return. He played 263 snaps on kick coverage. He played 252 snaps on punt return. He played 205 snaps on punt coverage. He played 168 snaps on field goal block. Like, the only special teams he didn't play in his Notre Dame career was PAT field goal. That's it. That's the only position he didn't play on special teams. That's why you're getting a guy like that. And so he just checks every box except for ideal size and length. That's the only box he doesn't check. If Jack Kaiser was the same exact athlete and he was 2 inches taller and had 2 extra inches of on each of his arms, I think he's a round or 2 higher, in my opinion. And so we'll see how that goes. But very happy for it's been think about what Jack Kaiser's gone through the last year. Talk about, like, you've hit your, like, this is kind of your sweet spot of your life. In the last year, Jack Kaiser's gotten engaged. He played for a national championship as a captain, and now he's drafted in the NFL draft. It's been a pretty good year for my guy, Jack Kaiser. There's no doubt about that. So happy for Jack. Next guy that got drafted, Shaun, is I think one of those players that you and I believe fell because of injury, and I think that's pretty fair to say. That's Riley Mills. Went in the 5th round of the NFL draft. He was taken number 142 overall of the 5th round and to the Seattle Seahawks, who the fit there is interesting, Shaun, because the Seahawks are still they play a lot of odd fronts. It's Mike McDonald is their coach. He was, I think he's their head coach, right? Mike McDonald, I believe, is their head coach, who was with the Michigan under Jim Harbaugh. Isn't he their new head coach in Seattle?
Yes, he is. Yep.
So, they're bringing in sort of the defense he liked to play. So Riley is a guy that's going to play inside and out, and I think that's a really nice fit for him because he's done that in college. He's played on the edge. He was a 4-down defensive end in 2022. Moved inside in 23 and 24. Well, I think his game is more ideally suited, but he's going to get to play over guards. He's going to get to play, inside and outside of tackles. So I think that versatility that he brings as a 300-pounder that can kind of move all over helps him. But then also the NFL is still, Shaun, a pass rushing heavy league, and he can rush the passer. He was the 4th pick of the 5th round. So he, even with the knee injury, he was right outside the 4th round, which, to your point, there were some teams looking at him in round 4 thinking, like, is this a sweet spot for him? And obviously nobody did, but the Seahawks made him the 4th pick of round 4. So, but for him, and really for the same thing with the 2 DBs, this is a really good scheme fit for Riley Mills as well. And I think that's something that has to matter too. You can get picked by a team, but what if you don't fit what they're trying to do? Riley's a really good fit because of that odd front type of thing that he can move all around. So love to see it. First Notre Dame defensive tackle to get drafted since Jerry Tillery went in round 1 of 2019.
Wow, that's a crazy stat. That's a crazy stat. That's one I did not know.
Kurt Hinish went undrafted, remember?
Yeah, he did. Yeah. He did.
Yep, he went undrafted.
So Riley for me is probably one of my favorite stories of development at Notre Dame. It's like one of my favorite stories. And I can remember when all of these decisions were being made, right? Because they had moved all of these guys inside that might have been considered outside guys. And then you had Lacey, you had Cross, you had Riley Mills, and then all of a sudden you see some defections. And this guy just comes out of the fray. And he was always connected to Howard Cross because of how well they both played together in 23. But Riley Mills, especially after the Northern, it was almost like Riley Mills was the guy on the interior that took Northern Illinois personally. And from that point on, he was just like, all right, I'm just about to wreck offensive lines. And to watch him make that rise, I feel irritated because I feel like the run he was on would have continued against Georgia, would have continued against Penn State, would have impacted the national championship game. Like, he was out of everyone that they lost, he was probably the most significant loss at that point in the season and for the entire season. Where even with Traore and Botello and the way they were playing early, who he became and the player he was and the level he was playing at the time of the injury, that right there, man, I love the fact that he was rewarded and that team said, we would love to see you work out, but we still, you know what? You're good enough for us to stash. We're going to take a pick in the 4th round knowing that we're not going to get production next season, more than likely. But we believe in you so much that we're going to use this pick to stash you and let you come back to be the player. That says a lot about what they thought about his film and what he did. Yeah. That's what I love about. That's an incredible story. Yeah. Just from beginning to end, what he became and him getting drafted. Incredible story for Riley Mills and his time at Notre Dame.
Did you see the video of him talking to the D-court? Like, so the GM calls him, and then the head coach. No, it didn't. It was the D-line coach, and then the D coordinator. And he kept just saying, "I told you, coach. I told you guys need to take me. I told you." Like, there had clearly been some discussions with Seattle, with the coaching staff about between him and Riley Mills. So, like, this isn't just some kid that they evaluated and met at the combine. This is a kid that clearly there. So you can tell Seattle had their eye on him for a bit, and then was able to get him early in the 4th round. So that was a very interesting selection right there, Shaun. So I'm happy for Riley Mills. I think the fit makes a lot of sense for him. And I do wonder how his draft stock would have been viewed had he been able to play against Georgia. Because Notre Dame's defensive line dominated Georgia. I'm watching all these Georgia offensive linemen get drafted on day 2, and I'm thinking, am I taking crazy pills? Because, like, I do like the center. I like the center, Jared Wilson. He has good film.
I like him, yeah.
But Ratledge is super inconsistent. The other guy is like, what? Like, what is going on? Oh, it's bad coaching. Give me a break. I watched Notre Dame eat these guys alive.
Yeah.
eat them alive. And
for
not
two reasons,
just the left tackle. They couldn't run the ball on Notre Dame either.
No.
If Riley Mills would have gone into that game, I think he would have dominated those guys. Dominated them. And I'm very curious what that would have done for – if he would have just got hurt one game later. Like, let's say he'd have got hurt. Let's say instead of it being Donovan Heinisch, it was Riley Mills that got that last sack of the game, and then that's when he tore his knee. Just 1 week later, I'm very curious how that would have impacted his draft stock. To have that film against that team, that would have been very interesting. But I'll tell you what, Caleb Williams is still having nightmares about Riley Mills because, like, I got these photos from that game where he's just like this about to grab Caleb Williams, and he's spinning out. Like, so several of the plays where he threw bad balls were plays where he was running away from Riley Mills.
I laughed because of the Notre Dame connection in that game. It's out of New Orleans. But then I laughed as a Bears fan, like, oh, that's who you're going to have at guard? That's who you're replacing the guys you lost with? Okay. I love this because, like you said, I watched Tate Ratledge, and I'm like, nah, there's no way he represents what Coach Campbell and the Lions have built as far as toughness and running the ball. That's not going to get it done, sir. That's not going to get it done. So I'll leave it there. Riley Mills is a great story. I fully expect he would have dominated against Georgia. He would have dominated against Penn State. And even though Penn State's offensive line was a whole lot better than Georgia's, he would have been impactful in that game, especially early on.
Yeah,
like some of the struggle you saw
that
early
run game.
on.
Yeah, I agree with that. So, Shaun, next guy on the list. Now we have a little bit of an offensive flavor finally coming. The next player that was picked for Notre Dame was Mitchell Evans in round 5. He was taken with the number 163 overall pick, and he was selected by the Carolina Panthers. Now, Carolina this offseason re-signed Tommy Tremble, which I thought was interesting. So Mitchell Evans is going to get an opportunity to be teamed up with a former Notre Dame player, which would be obviously Tommy Tremble. So Mitchell Evans continues Notre Dame's tradition of tight ends being drafted. Mitchell's an interesting player, Shaun, because the first thing about him that's an issue is the injuries. Like, this past year is the only year he ever played the full season because of without injuries. You know, he got a little dinged up as a freshman, got obviously injured a little bit as a sophomore, had the injury in the spring going into his junior year, was playing great football, and then tears his knee up against Pitt. He comes back, plays every game this year, but he wasn't 100% healthy physically. I don't think he was always locked in the way he needed to be locked in. The film this year was not impressive for most of the year, especially in the run game. But he had a really good postseason performance. He performed very well at, I think it was a Shrine Bowl, I think is the one. It was either that or the East-West game. Very strong performance. And the reality is when his tape is good, it's really good. So what you're doing, in my opinion, is in the 5th round is what you're saying is like, listen, we're taking a chance on a kid who at times has film that looks like that of a guy that should have been taken on day 2, but doesn't have the consistency of a guy that's being taken in day 2. For Mitchell Evans, it really comes down to this: is, dude, how good do you want to be, and how hard are you willing to work at it from an attitude standpoint, work ethic standpoint, all those type of things? Because if Mitchell Evans says, hey, you know what? I desire to be great, and I'm going to do everything I need to do to be great. I'm going to be this. I'm going to be that. He could be a really good player. He could end up being a big steal of this draft, but it's just going to come down to can he consistently step up and perform? That's what it's going to come down to, for in my opinion, for how well he's successful. But, 5th round, it's a good place to go. And for the Panthers, I know they already have a tight end, but when you've got a franchise quarterback like that, and you get a chance to add talented pass catchers, you add talented pass catchers. And I'll tell you that, just looking at it from a Panther standpoint, somebody asked in the chat earlier what we thought of the Panthers draft. I'm a big believer, Shaun, in that when you draft a franchise quarterback, you better build around him. And I got to tell you, the Panthers got 2 late-round players that I like a lot, potential-wise. They got some things to work on, but potential-wise. They obviously got Tet McMillan in round 1, which is a boomer bust pick. If Tet McMillan's another one of those guys, if he wants to be, he's an all-pro. if he wants to be. But then you went out and got Mitchell Evans and Jimmy Horn Jr. in rounds 5 and 6. You're giving your young quarterback some weapons on top of the weapons you already have. I thought that was a pretty smart. Again, I don't know about the Panthers' other needs overall, but I tell you what, they got Nick Scorton in round 2, who I like. I think that's more of where his skill set is. He's more of a round 2 guy. Never bought the first round hype with him. I just don't think he's quite twitchy enough to be a first round guy. He's a pretty good football player. The edge they got from Ole Miss has some talent, but Mitchell Evans is a good football player, and I think that was an understandably wise move, in my opinion, for the Panthers, because he's a guy that could outperform, if he wants to, can outperform that 5th round draft selection.
Well, like you said, of course, when you go to the NFL, more so than college and recruiting, the medicals come into play a lot. There's a lot of conversation with teams about medicals and, how you project. But also, you just talked about the Notre Dame tight end room and how they're viewed, from a professional. Tommy Tremble is very well respected in that locker room in Carolina. You might look at the production and say, okay, well, the production isn't, all world, but he's very much one of those leaders in that Carolina Panthers locker room. So that's why they brought him back. And so he will be one of those guys that Mitchell Evans can go in and learn from, learn the Carolina way, and learn how things are happening. And like you said, kudos to Bryce Young, in the midst of controversy, giving the Panthers reason to go out and invest and build around him. He had to give them a reason to do that because the struggles early, I'm sure they were wondering whether or not they needed to change directions and start looking for another quarterback possibly in a year or two. But that's just a situation I think is a positive situation for Mitchell Evans to walk into, where you have a veteran guy and you have other talented players. You mentioned something. I want to see the B-roll from all of these NFL draft rooms, because the NFL has cameras up in every draft room, and we always get the footage of the yeses and the hand claps and the high fives when they finally make their pick. I want to get the hitting of the table when the guy you really want is taking 2 spots in front of you. I want those moments.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Second round.
That'd be fun.
That would be cool. Yes. Like, put that B-roll out. Teams like, gosh darn it, like Dallas pounding the table when Tech McMillan goes a lot earlier than they probably thought he would. That's something I'll be interested in. But Mitchell Evans, these Notre Dame players are really great stories, B. I'm going to be honest with you, man. Stories of perseverance, stories of, really outperforming what people thought about them when they were on the high school level, and then outperforming what they thought they could become on the college level. I think when you look at Mitchell Evans, being able to come back, even when early on, when he started to become productive, it was kind of like, oh, okay, we didn't see this coming. They lost Michael Mayer, and unfortunately he gets injured. And to see him come back, and then to see him progress and become better as they went into the playoffs in the second half of the season, once again, a great football story, a great Notre Dame story. And I'm glad the kid got rewarded by being drafted where he got drafted at.
I want to say something before we move on to the final pick, because we brought this up during that conversation. And here's something that I saw in this draft, which I was encouraged by. I think one of the things the NFL, like it's funny to listen to Mel Kiper talk about how the NFL is bad at evaluating quarterback, because he's right. Now, I would argue he might be worse, but he's right. The NFL is bad about evaluating quarterbacks. I still think they're better than him, but he lost his. I mean, that was just so bad. Like, it's just unprofessional. But anyway, different conversation for a different day. One of the issues that I've had with the NFL, especially lately, but it's really been this way for a long time, is you get these NFL teams that invest in these big-time quarterbacks, high draft picks at quarterback, and then they don't really build around them. Denver Broncos did that for years, where they just wouldn't build around Elway. Like, they just expect him to carry the three amigos and Sammy Winder and Bobby Humphrey to championships. You know what I mean? And they were kind of very average players. So when I look at what we saw in this draft, I saw multiple teams that have young franchise quarterbacks make moves that are very clearly designed to building around their young franchise quarterbacks. For example, we talked about the Panthers going out there and getting multiple weapons. Their number 8 pick, you go out and get your franchise quarterback and arguably the best receiver in the draft. Certainly the most upside of any receiver in the draft, in my opinion. You look at the Washington Commanders, went out and got Josh Connerly in the first round of the draft. It took an offensive tackle to protect their young quarterback. They only had 5 picks. And then their third pick, they go out and get a receiver that ran a 4.3 at the combine, has a lot of production, had good production at Virginia Tech, had better production at Middle Tennessee. He's got to play a lot of football. So he's a guy you went out and got him. There was a couple other teams that as I was kind of going through and looking at what some of these teams are doing, these teams with young franchise quarterbacks, you look at let me find it here. There was another one here. We talked about the Panthers. Oh, the Bears. Say whatever you want about the Bears draft and whether you like picks or not like picks, but it's very clear that their picks were designed towards their franchise quarterback. You know, you went out and got what you believe to be the best tight end in the draft. We could I don't want to nitpick whether he was or was a good pick or not. I'm making the point that it was geared towards their franchise quarterback. You go out there and your second pick is Luther Burden, who was one of my favorite picks of the second round. Love the Luther Burden pick in the second round. Then your third pick is which is also the second round. You got an offensive tackle. And so, like, again, whether you like the picks or not, that's not the point that I'm trying to make. The point I'm trying to make is that you went out and said, hey, we're going to give our franchise quarterback some weapons. You look at the Denver Broncos. Their first pick was a corner because I think Jahdae Barron was just too valuable at that spot to, like, pass on. But then their number 2 pick, Shaun, is R.J. Harvey out of UCF. Their number 3 pick is Pat Bryant out of Illinois, somebody you're very familiar with. And so what you saw in this draft, Jordan Love for the Packers, 2 of their first 3 picks, wide receivers. They finally draft a wide receiver in the first round, and then in round 3, when they got Savion Williams. Their second pick, in between them, an offensive tackle, Anthony Belton. So I really felt, Shaun, Indianapolis did sort of the same thing. You know, they went out and got a tight end with their first pick for their young quarterback, and they got one of my favorite day 3 steals in DJ Giddens. I love DJ Giddens from Kansas State. I don't know how well his game projects the NFL, but I loved him in college. And then you look at Jacksonville. Now, do I think Jacksonville overpaid to get Travis Hunter? I do. Do I think Jacksonville still got arguably the best player in the draft? I do, as I've said to you before. He is one of 3 guys that I felt was in the conversation for just best player in the draft. Forget positional value, just best player. My 3 was Travis Hunter, Abdul Carter, and Mason Graham. Those I felt were like just the 3 arguably just best players in the draft. Forget position and all that, just best players. Well, you're going to first use him as a receiver. So what are you doing? You're giving your young franchise quarterback a dynamic weapon at receiver. I thought that was really noticeable. And then the Chargers, first 2 picks, running back in round 1, wide receiver in round 2. If Trey Harris can stay healthy, he's got a shot to do something there. But that's just kind of, Shaun, I was really impressed by that. Not everybody, but a lot of these teams, the Vikings, first 2 picks, offensive lineman, wide receiver. A lot of teams that, and then the last one. This team might have done the best job of any, the Patriots, with what they did for Drake May. You get a number 4 overall pick, you take a left tackle. Your next pick, Trayvon Henderson, so you're getting a really good dual threat weapon at running back. Your third pick is Kyle Williams out of Washington State. Your next pick, which is also in the 3rd round, you get a center. So your first 4 picks are all addressing the side of the ball where you have a newly minted franchise quarterback in Drake May, who you got last year. I don't know that I've ever seen in one draft this many teams with young franchise quarterbacks make a very clear, concerted effort to say, we're going to make sure we give this guy some help. As bad as I think the NFL is at evaluating quarterbacks, this is a good sign, in my opinion, Shaun, to see so many of them saying, hey, we're going to make sure we do the best job we can in giving our guys something, which is honestly, I thought the Dolphins did a bad job of that for years with Marino. I thought the Broncos did a terrible job of that for years with John Elway. And I thought the Giants did a pretty not very good job of that with Daniel Jones. He probably doesn't pan out anyway, but it's just kind of like, okay, you're not helping them a whole lot. And so I thought that was interesting to see as well, Shaun. Was an observation I had. And it made me think of it because we were talking about it with the Mitchell Evans pick and the fact that they got 3 what I think are pretty talented, productive pass rushers in this draft for their young quarterback.
Yeah, and we had an offline conversations. I was laughing about, just checking out the Chicago Bears press conferences each day, what they had to say. Like you said, the Bears had the same mindset. We're going to build around Caleb Williams. And that's what they did with the first 3 picks until they got to that second. I believe until they got to their that's third second round pick. And they traded back, got an extra pick.
It was their 4th overall pick.
The 4th overall pick. Yeah, got Shamar
that's the first
Turner.
time they went to defense, right?
Got Shamar Turner, which for me, from a value standpoint, you can argue. I just don't like the fit as far as an undersized guy because that's not what you need. Like you have, I guess he's going to be their true 3 technique because they really never had one. But I just want to talk about, teams building around those players and the dynamic it gives because of the salary cap. And I'm interested in whether or not this comes into college football because of how football is moving more towards a pro model. Like when you have a young quarterback, then you allocate the funds to build around the young quarterback and the draft picks. And then when a young quarterback comes into his prime, then you can take away some of the money allocated because he's good enough to make up for what you don't possibly have around him. So because you start to lose guys to free agency because they have performed and they've gotten to that place where they're ready for their second contract. And from a cap standpoint, you can't afford everybody. So I just think it's an interesting dynamic, right? And how it might play, how this cap thing might play even into recruiting down the road and where you cap certain positions and whether or not certain positions from a recruiting standpoint will be capped. Will the top 100 be fit into a certain cap space? It's going to be very interesting, possibly how the evolution of this pro model coming into recruiting and how it might impact recruiting. And you have a guy like a Mike Martin now in the building with Notre Dame to kind of help with understanding how things might go in the next 3 to 5 years. But I agree with you. You have to invest in your young quarterbacks. When you get a young quarterback, the Bears did that with the tight end, the offensive lineman. And I love the Luther Burden pick. I've been watching since he was in high school in East St. Louis. So I love that pick. That's fantastic. That's a first round pick you're getting in the second round.
Yeah,
that's
like
fantastic.
And somebody told me well, they don't really need a receiver, and I was like, I understand that. You've got.
Isn't that the best time to go get somebody when you don't need it? Like an elite player at that
my
position?
thing is Keenan Allen's, I think, still with the Bears, right? He's not exactly young.
No. Keenan Allen's gone.
He's gone. DJ Moore's
DJ and Rome.
I mean, not exactly young anymore. No. And sometimes it comes to a point in time where it's like, okay, that guy's just too good not to pass up. And I feel like if Luther Burden would have played with a better quarterback the last couple of years, his numbers would have looked a whole lot different. So I actually really like that pick, to be honest with you, Shaun. I thought that was a really smart pick. So that was one of my favorite. Like I said, I think it might have been one of my favorite second round picks, non-Notre Dame picks in the second round. Because I didn't love the Colson Loveland pick at 10. I actually like Colson Loveland. I just thought he got a little bit too much of a weird late push. To be a top 10 pick. I see that.
I think that's more about the head coach trying to duplicate what he did, which for me kind of a problem. But you do understand duplicating, but don't duplicate to the point where you bring over the same middle of the road defense. Right. I don't want that. So don't ignore the obvious holes of pass rusher and some linebackers that are kind of plateaued, and I would love to see some more athleticism. And Jerron Brisker can't stay on the field because he's on his 4th concussion. So can you trust him on the back end? We're just going to ignore those things because we didn't answer them in free agency. So this feeling of, we're just going to build around Caleb because I think we have enough on defense. I don't know about that. But other than that, the coach, I would have preferred Tyler Warren. I
agree.
Because I saw the kid, I'm like, hey. I know he might not be the tight end you had in Detroit, but
yeah. Let's wrap up the draft talk, Shaun. Obviously, the sixth and final player for Notre Dame to get selected was Riley Leonard, the Notre Dame quarterback, who went in the 6th round, number 189 overall. It's kind of like middle of the 6th round, number 189 overall to the Indianapolis Colts. This is a really interesting one because I've always felt like Riley needs to go somewhere that you've got either go somewhere where a system can easily adapt to your athleticism, and so you get that dual threat guy off the bench if your guy goes down, or ideally go to a system that they're already implementing run throw type of skills, and he's going to one. It's a very interesting quarterback room because you've got 2 former top 10 picks who are still young on ahead of you in Anthony Richardson and now Daniel Jones, who they signed in the offseason. I think there's major question marks about whether or not Anthony Richardson is going to work out. And my big issue with Anthony Richardson now is the same one that I had when he came out. He shouldn't have come out because it's like, what are you trying to do? Well, you maximized your draft value. It's harder to go much higher than 4, but you weren't ready. You weren't ready for the NFL, and not a lot of NFL teams are going to stash a number 4 overall pick. You're getting pick number 4. They expect you to play now. And you're talking about a guy that checked out of a game, just hasn't really developed his game because he needed more time. He needed more time in the oven in college. And I thought that was a mistake. Some of those guys figure it out. Some of those guys don't. We don't know what Anthony Richardson's going to be. And then obviously Daniel Jones, where's he at mentally and where's he at with his play? It's a very interesting quarterback room for Riley Leonard to be stepping into. There's no doubt about that. So, and that's another team that you look at. I said this to a friend the other day. He was asking me about the Colts. I said, look, I don't know if Anthony Richardson is going to make it or not. I have no clue. And neither does anyone else. If they think they know what's going to happen, you're guessing. And you may guess right, but you're guessing. But here's the reality of it, Shaun. When I look at that Colts depth chart and I look at what they have, now obviously their tackle position could be upgraded a little bit, but you're talking about what? You've got Michael Pittman, you've got Alec Pierce, you now have Tyler Warren, you've got Jonathan Taylor, you've got Quentin Nelson. If this guy can't play, that's a pretty attractive job, in my opinion, for a free agent quarterback. Or if you just say, screw it, he ain't the guy, and you go draft another quarterback in a year or two, either way, Shaun, somebody's walking into a pretty good offensive situation personnel-wise around the quarterback. And like I said, there's going to be no excuses for Anthony Richardson if he doesn't make it. When you look at what they've put around, they are building around him. Now it's just about whether or not he can perform. And they benefited from the Bears taking Tyler Warren. But that's what Riley Leonard's walking into. Like, it's not a given that Riley Leonard's name might not get called if he can make the team. It's not a given his name won't get called considering what's in front of him in that depth chart. Not saying he's the long-term answer, but I'm just saying, like, that's a really intriguing landing spot for Riley Leonard because that's a very shaky quarterback room. Shakier than you'd expect of a quarterback room that is a recent number 4 and a recent number 6 overall draft pick in front of them.
Man, I am very much a believer that the competitive nature of Riley Leonard is going to bode well for him when it comes to the NFL. Like, I fully expect him to make the roster. Whether or not he can become a starter and a number 1 starter for years in the NFL, that's in his hands. That's in his hands. The coaches, the organization, it's all a collaborative effort. But the kid is a competitor and he's a winner. And when you have that in your back pocket, it can help you go a long way, right? But the other things have to be developed. And we know the things from a skill standpoint that have to be developed. No, man, we don't have to lament it and drag it out for a long form
like you can't break tackles, apparently.
Hey, man, leave Matt alone. Man, he's a good dude, man. He probably looked at the wrong quarterback in his notes. That's what he did.
Sure.
He was looking at the wrong quarterback in his notes.
Yeah.
And he's
his
like,
biggest takeaway.
They went to commercial break.
Tackles.
He's like, oh, man.
And spends too much time moving in the pocket to throw the deep ball. Okay, sure. Okay.
But no, Riley Leonard, I love that he got drafted. I love the situation he got drafted to. There's more than anything, especially at the quarterback position. Look, you want to get drafted to the right spot. That's why I love what Andy Reid said. Andy Reid said, he said the best time to take a quarterback is when you don't need one.
Yep.
We went and got Patrick Mahomes when we didn't need him. Alex Smith has just taken us to the playoffs. We didn't need him, but we saw we had the opportunity to go get this kid. We went and got him. That's the best time to go get one, right? So that's why the Packers, for years, they didn't need a quarterback, but they would go get one in the second round or late in the first round. And winning organizations seem to have the same thought process towards the quarterback position when it comes to evaluation, knowing when to draft a guy and then developing that guy and getting them ready. And that hasn't been something that we've seen necessarily in recent history. But Shane Steichen seems to have a type, whether it's in the first round or whether it's not in the sixth round. Like, let me get an athletic guy.
Didn't he come from Arizona? Where he had Kyler Murray and he came from Arizona, or did he come from Philly?
No, he came from Philly.
Philly, okay.
Yeah, he was with Jalen Hurts.
The other guy from Philly went to Arizona then.
Arizona, yeah. And so, I think he fits. That's the beautiful thing. He fits what they want from a quarterback. What Riley Leonard does, he fits. Now it's about whether or not he can get better at the small things that you need to do to be able to win consistently in the NFL at that position.
Yep.
It's a great spot for him to land, and then the familiarity of the fan base in the state with him.
Yeah.
You know, being in Notre Dame, that helps because that's going to be something he's probably going to get as a backup. He's probably going to have all types of money coming in outside of his contract.
Yeah. Just
from sponsors and commercial type.
Well, he's an adopted native now of Indiana. So we know he's from Alabama, but he's been adopted by the state of Indiana. So that's for sure. So, Shaun, that's going to do it for the 2025 NFL draft show. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I say
you want to add
thing?
some more on the draft?
So resident Bears fan, I got DK, kind of saying Bears middle of the road defense. Name the all pros on the defense. That's all. The only name the all pros. I can name the Cincinnati, the Kansas City Chiefs. I can name their all pros. The Eagles, I can name their all pros. Even the Rams, they have rookies come in, become Pro Bowlers and pros. Name the all pros for the Bears outside of Jalen Johnson. Give it to me up front, linebacker, name it. If we just want to act like that defense is ready to go, okay. I tend to think they need some more help and need some more talent. But
so they were 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th in scoring last year, which is kind of
middle of the road. That's middle of the road. What is
2023, they were, let's see, bottom half 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, the 20th the year before. So slight.
And that 20th came from a much better performance once they made the trade with the Redskins. With the Commanders to get a pass rusher. They finished the season defensively as like one of the top 10 teams. So, but they still ended up like 20th. So that's what I'm saying. This feeling locally where it's like, man, our defense is ready to go based upon.
I can't make an argument, Shaun. I don't watch a lot of NFL. All I'll say is if I'm looking at their season last year, in the last, let's see, they gave up less than 20 points in all but no, I'm sorry, I'm looking at that wrong. So in their down the stretch, they gave up a lot of points down the stretch. Beginning of the year, they started off well. They didn't give up over 20 points until November 24th, more than 20 until November 24th against Minnesota. Then they finished the year, gave up 30, 23, 38, 30, 34, 6, and 22. Yeah. So people, I think, are saying like, well, they had some injuries, and that's why they didn't finish as well as they started. I don't know. Look, it's a
DK said he misunderstood. Thought we talked about the Lions because the Bears had injuries as well. But even with that,
you're talking about the Lions? Gotcha.
Yeah, he thought I was talking about the Lions. But even with that, I think That's the fear for me. Like, I understand the success that Ben Johnson had in Detroit, but I just don't try to copy that.
Yeah.
And bring it here. Like,
because you're saying because he has a middle of the road defense.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yep. We'll see. It's going to be interesting, Shaun. So that's going to do it for the 2025 NFL Draft Talk. We're going to talk some Notre Dame 2026 NFL Draft next. But before we go, folks, to that section, do us a favor. Set a little thumbs up button right below. I think it's probably below me, maybe a little bit below Shaun, depending on what you're using to watch the show. Go ahead and hit that like button, that thumbs up button for us. We would greatly appreciate that. But as always, we love it that you all watch our shows, whether it's you're listening via YouTube, live or recorded, or you're listening on podcast platform. We always appreciate that. We always like thanks and 5-star reviews. But the best way to always contribute and support Irish Breakdown is to sign up for the message board at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So next, we are going to dive into some 2026 NFL draft. And we're going to kind of start, Shaun, with a little bit of conversation about some things we're hearing. I'm not seeing it. I'm not reading it. I've told you all I don't really watch or read other people. I'm simply going by what my friends have reached out to me, and just to some of the panic of, hey, are you surprised Notre Dame only had 6 guys drafted? And I said, not really, because I didn't expect anyone else to get drafted. Howard Cross is a 6'1", 285-pound defensive tackle who didn't test very well. I don't know why you were expecting him to. Well, he's not Aaron Donald, right? I mean, I didn't expect Bo Collins to get picked, although he was probably the guy that I thought could be the one that could sneak in because he's got a lot of career production and he's got the measurables: 6'3", over 200 pounds, tested very well. I didn't really expect anybody else to get picked. So I wanted to talk a little bit about what does that say about Notre Dame? Because here's some numbers, Shaun, and to speak to Notre Dame, and they only had 6 guys drafted. Well, if you look at some of the other top teams in the country, Ohio State, 14 players drafted. They had 7 players picked before Notre Dame's first guy came off the board. Georgia this season, who Notre Dame played in the playoffs, had 13 players taken, 3 in the first round. Oregon this year had 10 players taken. Texas had 12 players taken. So you get all these teams. Michigan a year ago had 15 players taken in the draft, and then had 3 guys go in the first round this year. What is going on at Notre Dame? Did they just get lucky? No, that none of those things are true. Just like Penn State did not get lucky this year because they only had 5 guys drafted. Here's the reality of Notre Dame's 2026 NFL draft. It went exactly how it was supposed to go, basically. The number of people that were picked, that were eligible to be picked. Because Notre Dame, unlike Ohio State, unlike Texas, unlike Georgia, returns the vast majority of their best players. Notre Dame did not have a single offensive lineman from their 2024 roster in the draft. Not one. Not a backup, not a starter, nobody. Their leading rusher, matter of fact, their top 4 leading rushers at running back all return. Their top pass catcher returns. 5 of the top 7 guys in tackles for loss return. 5 of the top 7 guys in tackles return. I think it was, 8 of 10, 7 of 10. Let me go look at the article I wrote, Shaun, and give you this data because this says a lot about it. So you only lost 3 starters from your offense. 2 of them got drafted. You lost 5 starters from your defense. 3 of them got drafted. If you look at your what you have coming back, you return your leading rusher, your leading pass catcher, 5 of your top 7 tacklers, 5 of your top 7 tackle for loss producers, and 7 of your top 10 sack producers, and 7 of the 9 players that intercepted a pass last year all return. Here's some more data for you, Shaun, if you want to understand why Notre Dame's draft went the way that it went. By the end of last season, Notre Dame had 11 starters. That's half your starters had freshman or sophomore eligibility. 8 of them were true sophomores or true freshmen, which means a third of your starting lineup was not even eligible. Over a third of your starting lineup was not even eligible for the draft this year. Not even eligible for the draft. you could make a case that 2 of Notre Dame, if not 3 of Notre Dame's best pro prospects next year, won't even be eligible for next year's NFL draft. When you get Leonard Moore, Bryce Young, and CJ Carr won't even be eligible for next year's draft, much less this year's draft. Jeremiah Love, Leonard Moore, not eligible for this year's draft. Adon Schuler, Drake Bowen, not eligible for this past year's draft. So not Anthony Knapp, Charles Jagasol, not eligible for this past year's draft. Here's a little bit more for you. If you look at their 2 deep, so they had 13 players on the second team that were freshman or sophomore eligibility, the 2 deep. 11 of them were true freshmen or true sophomores. So if you look at Notre Dame's 2 deep at the end of the season, 24 players of the 44 had freshman or sophomore eligibility this past season. That includes 19 that were true freshmen or true sophomores. So a large chunk of your team could not even be drafted if they wanted to be drafted because they weren't eligible for the draft. So when you have that much coming back, that's going to kick into it. Somebody had mentioned to me, like, can Marcus Freeman produce top-level draft talent? So we don't know the answer to that because Marcus Freeman's first full recruiting class at Notre Dame as the head coach was the 2023 class. Do you know how many players in the 2023 class got drafted this year, Shaun, for anyone in college football? 0, because they're not eligible for the draft yet. They won't be eligible for the draft even until next year. His first class as defensive coordinator has only had 1 player from that class even declare for the NFL draft. He got picked in the second round despite a knee injury in Benjamin Morrison. So his first class has only had 1 kid declare. First class as D coordinator, had 1 kid declare, and he went higher than any player at his position in almost 30 years, if you count Bobby Taylor. Over 30 years, if you don't count Bobby Taylor, who was drafted as a safety. So when you look at it, Shaun, it's like, well, you kind of understand if I'm trying to make a point and not – like if I'm actually trying to make a real – a contextual argument, not just some sort of hot take I can put out on social media. That's exactly why Notre Dame. And the title of my article was basically the low draft numbers in 2025 speaks volumes about the 2025 roster. Same thing for Penn State. Why does Penn State have low draft numbers? Because they didn't have that many guys eligible for the draft. If Katron Allen and Nicholas Singleton would have gone to the draft, their numbers would look a whole lot different. If some of their defensive players would have gone to the draft instead of coming back to school, those numbers would look a lot different. If Drew Aller would have gone to the NFL instead of coming back for his senior year, those numbers would have looked a whole lot different. And so the thing about Notre Dame is a lot of their best players weren't even eligible for the draft. So the next couple years, 2 to 3 years, are going to look a whole lot different than Notre Dame. But it's not going to be – it may not be enormously different next year because for it to be a big draft class next year, like 10, 12, 13 guys, win a title, because then all of a sudden you get guys overdrafted. As I said, when Georgia won their first title, they got like a 3rd-string tight end got drafted. Okay, it's the way the NFL does it. But it also means you have a bunch of true juniors declaring for the NFL draft for next year's draft. So I wanted to first have that conversation, Shaun, because I'm sure you were getting hit with it as well, like I was. Are you concerned about Notre Dame's low draft numbers? And I wanted to be like, how many guys did you think were going to get drafted this year? Because, like, they don't even have that many dudes that play that were even eligible. Like, Notre Dame didn't even have 14 guys that could even potentially get drafted that even played for them last year. Unless you want to count, like, Devin Ford and Mitch Jeter. And, I mean, like, did they even have 14 draft-eligible players that play? So you had the 6 that were picked. You had Howard Cross. You had R.J. Oben. You had Rod Hurd, Chris Mitchell, Jaden Harrison, Bo Collins. I said Howard Cross already, right? Did I say Howard Cross? So that's 13. Am I missing somebody that actually played for this team? And that includes a kicker. Like, I can't think of anybody. Like, you didn't even have as many draft-eligible players that actually played for you that Ohio State had get drafted. Jordan Clark, that's another one. So I just like to put context into things, Shaun, because people like to overreact and freak out and make these little quick, 200, character comments on social media and stuff like that, and freak out about things. And I'm responding to what people have said to me. I'm not responding to what anyone else in the Notre Dame media might have put out. Apparently, there were some people saying things on Twitter about it. That's not what I'm responding to. I'm responding to people that are fans, Irish Breakdown fans, Notre Dame fans that have come to me and asked me this question. And so I'm making this point, like, this is exactly what you expected this draft class to look like. There will be at least one or two guys that get drafted next year that played at Notre Dame but left because they were not going to guarantee a starting job, and they'll get drafted next year. So there will be a lot of players from this 2024 team end up getting drafted. It's just not going to be the year after the draft because most of their top players are coming back next year. And that's a reason to be kind of fired up about it, Shaun.
When I was at the pro day, I think it was evident the conversation was amongst the media on the sideline. Yo, when was the last time Notre Dame didn't have an offensive lineman working out at pro day? Like, this is weird. Like, this isn't a Notre Dame pro day. Like, you're used to the Notre Dame pro day dominated by the offensive line, the tight end, a few defensive linemen, and running backs maybe. Nah, this year was totally different. And it was an anomaly from the norm at Notre Dame, but also, there really wasn't star power, right? Even though you had numbers that might not live up to in 23, they probably didn't live up to the top teams. You still had star power in both of the offensive linemen. That's where people were flocking. There were coaches, head coaches, GMs, scouts. Everybody was there to see Blake Fisher and Joe Alt. There was no mistake who the stars of the show were. You didn't have a star this year. There was no star of the show, right? I guess X.
But yeah, he didn't even do all the right.
No, maybe if Ben wasn't hurt.
Morrison couldn't work out.
He couldn't work out. So there was no star to the show. And like you said, just, if you had read the guys that worked out at the pro day, you should not have anticipated or had an expectation of anything grand when it came to the NFL draft, right? And I think it goes to the greater point that we talked about when we were discussing the commitment of Ayden Pouncey at the defensive back position and what Mike Mickens was facing early on when he was evaluating and recruiting at Notre Dame, which was, we need numbers. Like, we need numbers. We need guys in the defensive backfield. And what you're seeing is draft classes that are a product of the lack that existed when Marcus Freeman came to Notre Dame as a defensive coordinator, and eventually when he took over as the head coach. Mm-hmm. They lacked depth, they lacked numbers, and they lacked depth of talent.
Yeah.
Now, starting next year, hopefully you start to see that being solved throughout the years, turn into greater impact in the NFL draft and the NFL draft classes at Notre Dame. And it's going to take time. So to overreact because the team you played, and that's really the biggest issue, the team you played and lost to, in contrast, now you want to make it about, see, look at their draft class, look at our draft class.
Mm-hmm. But
come on, you need to contextualize that a little bit better.
Somebody in the chat just said what I was about to say, because I was going to lead to this. What's part of the reason Ohio State had so many guys picked? Was it a bunch of portal guys? No, I think they have 2 portal guys drafted. Yeah. Junkins and the quarterback.
How many of his kids came back?
So that's 3.
Yeah.
But like how many players did they have drafted last year? Do you remember how many guys Ohio State had drafted last year, Shaun?
It wasn't a lot because most of the guys came back.
4.
Yeah.
4. It's exactly the point. Did that mean Ohio State didn't have a lot of talent? I mean, no. Notre Dame had almost twice as many players drafted last year than Ohio State did. They had 7, Ohio State's 4. Does that mean Notre Dame had a better roster than Ohio State? I mean, we could actually have that conversation. We've had that conversation. But the point was Ohio State was returning everybody. And then they had a couple really key additions to their from the portal that they got. Junkins obviously was a key addition. You got Caleb Downs was a key addition. a lot of the guys that got drafted, I think 3 of the drafted players, I believe, are portal guys. If I'm remember off the top of my head, Will Howard, Judkins, and Josh Simmons, I believe, were the only portal guys they had, because JT's a born and bred Buckeye player, Jack Sawyer, Tyleek Williams, Ty Hamilton, Cody Simon, Denzel Burke, Lathan Ransom, Emeka, Travion were all homegrown Buckeyes, meaning they were signed out of high school. And then one of the other portal guys didn't get drafted, Seth McLaughlin, who might have got drafted if he didn't get hurt late in the year. So that's kind of you want to talk about what you want to point to. That's it right there. Look at Ohio State last year, who had 4 guys get picked last season. Yeah, you had a receiver that went in the first round. You had a second-round pick at D-tackle, a fourth-round pick at tight end, and a linebacker in round 5. So it wasn't even like you even had a ton of high-level talent. You had 2 guys taken on the first 2 rounds last year, and then a 4th and a 5th rounder. So that's the thing, that if you're a Notre Dame fan, you should actually look at this and be like, hey, I'm kind of fired up about this, because the reason the numbers were – and Ohio State knew they were going to have low numbers last year, because of the fact they knew that everybody was coming back. If Jack Sawyer and JT and Lathan Ransom and Travion Henderson and all those guys would have declared a year ago, Emeka would have been at worst a day 2 pick if he would have declared last year. At worst, a day 2 pick. But they were coming back for some. JT is probably a day 2 pick if he comes back. Like, you could even argue that his draft value went down after this past season, because I didn't think he was quite as good. He stepped up when it mattered, like he always does. So I think that's the thing that you point to and say, you want to find out why Notre Dame's numbers were the way that they were. Look at what they did. Look at what's coming back. And that's what's kind of has me fired up. So I want to talk about that, Shaun, but I do want to kind of look a little bit about the potential for the 2026 draft. Do you have something?
Can we have a question? That? Yeah, about draft classes before we get to the 26 class and talk about the impact, right? I think Andrew Gilmore brought up a point, and I had to look it up. I was like, oh, man, that might be a good point. And 7 guys taken in the 2019 class, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now tell me let's have an honest conversation about the talent out of those 7 guys. Let's have an honest conversation about the talent, because I think the conversation is about the elite talent. That's what people are looking for, right? Not just talent, elite talent at Notre Dame moving forward that we're going to talk about and project in the 26
draft class, or are we talking
the draft class in Notre Dame, okay, right? Jerry Tillery went 28th in the first round. Mike Boykin surprised everybody because the production wasn't there, and he went 3rd because of what he did at the combine. He went 3rd to the Ravens. Julian Love went in the 4th. Drew Tranquil went in the 4th. Dexter Williams went in the 6th. Alize Mack went in the 7th. So as far as
I think,
how much better is that class than the class that just came out?
I'm looking this up. Just give me a second, Shaun, because I actually think he's talking about. Hold on a second. So
well, he typed 2019. That's why I pulled it up.
Hold on, just 1 second. 4,
I think it's a very interesting
5,
conversation when it comes.
He's talking about the 2019 recruiting class. Basically, he's pushing back on the notion that we're giving love to Marcus Freeman. He's adding more talent because he's.
Well, he said 7 guys drafted.
But Brian Kelly, they had 7 guys from the 19 class got drafted. So seven recruits that signed with Notre Dame in 2019 got drafted.
Okay.
I still don't think that's necessarily a great number, but basically that's him running cover for Brian Kelly again and acting like we said Brian Kelly never produced anybody in the NFL draft.
I just want to use it as a greater conversation from as we look and project. All right, what is talent? Are we just looking at it? Well, we got this many guys drafted, so that says we got talent. Or are we looking at guys that are drafted from rounds 1 to 4 in bulk? Just look at the first 7 guys from Ohio State.
But my point would be this. If you're going to use that to run cover for Brian Kelly again, Brian Kelly had that 2019 class for 3 years.
Okay. I didn't know that was the intent.
How many big wins did he have? But that's what he's saying. He said it. Okay. You can look at when he said it at the time when we were talking about, the talent that Marcus Freeman's bringing in and all that kind of stuff. That's what he's doing. Because I like Andrew, but that's what he does. He's always got to play the Brian Kelly protectionist mode,
Okay.
right? But I'd say, well, then why didn't you win any big games when you had that really talented class for 3 years? That'd be my question.
Yeah,
So,
I just thought it was a perfect catapult into the conversation about talent, like the upper echelon talent that I think we're going to start to see.
Because that is a key, Shaun. I mean, look, to win a championship, you do need that high level, top 50 NFL draft pick talent. I do think that's accurate. Like Michigan didn't have a team that was like 2019 LSU or 2018 Clemson, but they very clearly had a lot of first-round talent. Now, I think some of the guys that got drafted in the first round were a little overrated, especially, I'm not a huge J.J. McCarthy fan. But I just got done telling you that I think Mason Graham was in the conversation for best player in the draft for this year. He was pretty good last year as well. You look at Colson Loveland. Do I think he got picked where he should? I wouldn't have picked him that high. He's still a top 50 draft player, in my opinion. Kenneth Grant is a first-round talent. Will Johnson, if he doesn't get hurt, is a first-round talent. And, again, if we're talking about where he would have been picked if he was able to come out last year, which he wasn't eligible to come out last year because he was a true sophomore, but if he was eligible to come out last year and doesn't have injuries, he's probably a guy that's a first-round talent. Yeah. So I do think if you're going to make a case about Notre Dame needing to still upgrade its elite talent in the draft, and the draft is evident of that, I think there's some merit to that, but that's the whole point of what we're talking about. All those players for Notre Dame that are those type of players, those top high-level elite talents, not the smart, savvy, great football players like Xavier Watts and Jack Kaiser, but the elite talents, the whole point of what we're talking about is those guys are still on the team. They weren't in the draft. It's Jeremiah Love. That's Jadarian Price. That's Leonard Moore. That's Charles Jagasol. That's Bryce Young. It's those type of players. And then, guys that are coming into the class now. And so if I've seen mock drafts that if everyone was eligible to be drafted, every one of those I saw, which I think are stupid because one guy had Arch Manning going number 1 overall if he was eligible. I'm like, the NFL may suck at drafting quarterback. They're not taking Arch Manning number 1 overall with 2 career starts. Give me a freaking break. But anyway, every one of those I saw had Jeremiah Love in it. I'm seeing these way too early 2026 mock drafts that have Jeremiah Love, Charles Jagasol, and Malachi Fields. Now, again, I don't put a lot of stock in those. They're fun to talk about, and we'll kind of look at that. But the reality is they need that more high-level talent. So, and Andrew, you can say you're giving respect to the pre-Freeman era. Nobody's saying the pre-Freeman era sucked and they had no players. So, again, you're doing a straw man thing to try to run cover for Brian Kelly because you can say you're not doing that, but when your argument is that, then you're doing that. And, again, this guy that you respect so much, why didn't he win more with that class? He had it for 3 years. Why didn't he win more with it?
Well, Brian, this is where I want the conversation to go, right? Big time talent, right? That class had big time talent.
Yeah.
Based upon what?
You had 1 first-round draft.
You can't base it upon production and winning in college, and you can't base it upon production in the NFL. So the term big time talent. And we're still having the conversation about Marcus Freeman elevating the talent as it matriculates into the NFL from what it was. So if it's being improved, at what point give me the small or big sample size that says Notre Dame had big time talent? Because just being drafted rounds 4, 5, that doesn't mean
that entire linebacker class got drafted. 19 class, Maris, JD, and Jack.
Right.
That doesn't happen if Marcus Freeman's not the defensive coordinator and then the head coach at Notre Dame. Brian Kelly doesn't do that. How do I know that? Because I watched him piss away players like Niles Morgan and guys for years and not do that. So, you can sit there and say it all you want and try to give respect. How many times, and this is the thing, it's a straw man, and this is what you do. How many times have we said that Brian Kelly pissed away talent? How many times have I said the 2015 team was one of the most talented teams Notre Dame's ever had? How many times have I argued about all the elite talent on the 2011 team that had, 4 first-round draft picks on it, Shaun? Zach Martin, Tyler Eifert, Michael Floyd, and Harrison Smith, and that doesn't even include Manti.
Yeah.
Like, we've never said they didn't have talent. We've never said they didn't have high-level talent. So you can run all the cover you want for Brian Kelly. What we said is not about Brian Kelly. We're talking about this team moving forward. We're talking about what this coaching staff is adding. And then you felt the need to defend a coaching staff that hasn't been here in years for some odd reason and take the conversation a different way. This is about what's here now and what's coming down the pike and what Marcus Freeman is doing now. Let's also not forget that Cam Hart is probably not playing, is not getting drafted if it's not for this coaching staff. Xavier Watts, Marcus Freeman had to go take him from the offense when he got here as defensive coordinator. So we need to, some of y'all need to move past this because everything we talk about is not a shot at a coach that hasn't been up here forever. And you did bring up Brian Kelly. You even said you did. You just said, dude, now you're being dishonest, and that I don't appreciate. I'm showing respect to the pre-Freeman era. Who's that? Who's that? What is the pre? Are you talking about Ty Willingham? Talking about Charlie Weiss? Bob Davie? Who's the pre-Freeman era that you're trying to give respect to? So don't tell me you didn't bring up Brian Kelly. You did bring up Brian Kelly. So you can miss me with that right now. I'm tired of that. I'm tired of every time we talk about what's going on right now, some of y'all feel the need to go run cover for Brian Kelly. If he was that good, how come he never did things that Marcus Freeman has done in 3 years? Explain that to me. Could you imagine if this coaching staff, Trev and I did this last week, Shaun. Mm-hmm. What would the 2015 season look like if they had this coaching staff? We had that conversation Friday. So we've never said that era didn't have talent. Matter of fact, we've said the opposite. But you finally have a coaching staff that knows actually what to do with that talent. And that's why they could beat Georgia and beat Indiana and beat Penn State in big games.
What's so interesting. You know who actually said they didn't have elite talent? The former coach.
The former coach.
That's why he left. He literally said, I need to go somewhere
where I can have players to win a championship with. He said that. Marcus Freeman won more major bowl games in a 10-day span than Brian Kelly won in 10 years at Notre Dame. 2-0. 2 New Year's Six bowl games, major bowl games in 10 days than what Brian Kelly won in 11 years at Notre Dame. So I don't know why you feel the need to constantly bring up that era. We're trying to move on from it. So that's what we're going to do now. Because this is about the now and the future, not looking back on a coach who failed for over a decade to take advantage of the talent he had. This coach and this staff just showed us that they can win that they can actually maximize the talent they have. And that's what the point of what we're trying to have a conversation about.
So moving forward, Brian, at 26, what's the chances that Notre Dame can have 5 to 6 guys in the first 3 rounds?
That's going to so let's kind of look at this on both sides of the ball, Shaun.
Mm-hmm.
The conversation is I still think at least half of their first round talents are not going to be
coming out
the draft next year.
Yeah.
Bryce Young, Leonard Moore are 2 guys that are not eligible. I think I think CJ Carr, if he is the quarterback, I think he can be. I think eventually he's a first round talent. I've always felt that. That's why I had him as a 5-star. That's not why. It's because I don't look at the NFL draft, but because he was a 5-star player, you kind of think he's kind of got that kind of upside. Yeah. And then the only other guy that I think, Gilby Lambert doesn't have, he's not eligible for the draft. Will Black. Right. There's guys like that haven't played. I'm talking about the guys that have played. But the other aspect of it, Shaun, is I don't know that one of the other potential first-round draft picks is going to come out after next year, and that's Charles Jagasaw.
Right.
I don't know that he's like being a one-year starting offensive lineman, which is essentially what he'd be next year, a one-year starter. He only started 2 games before that. Is that really enough experience for him to go to the draft? Maybe. If he's that dominant, then he'll be a first-round pick. If Charles Jagasaw declares next year, it's because he thinks he's going to be a first-round pick. John, you know that family well. You know his support system well. The only reason he'd come out is he's being told he's a first-round pick, in my opinion.
Right. Fair.
So
Thanks.
I still say the only guy that is a Notre Dame recruit that is a first-round talent that will be eligible for the draft next year is Jeremiah Love, in my opinion. Now, what you're seeing that because again, I don't think Jagasaw will come out, but if he does, he's a first-round talent. Mm-hmm. The other guy that's been interesting, so let's look at the offense, Shaun. That's first-round talent. Now, somebody else is Kingston Viliama-Asa is another one who could be a round 1 or 2 type of guy, not eligible for the draft. I'm curious about where Drake Bowen. I think he is a guy that could go in the first 3 rounds. He's eligible for the draft. It's unlikely that he leaves after his 3rd year.
Comes out. Right.
So a lot of these guys, like even Jalen Sneed, who a lot of people think is a high draft pick, he's got to show me a lot before I'm talking about him being drafted, at all, much less in the first few rounds. But he's a big-time athlete. He still has eligibility left. So if you look at the roster this year, Shaun, there's only 2 players on the entire offense that don't have eligibility beyond next season. There's only 2 guys that we'll see this year that don't have a choice whether they do or don't come back, assuming that Jordan Faison still starts. Now, if Will Pauling ends up starting at Z, then it's 3. Mm-hmm. And that's Malachi Fields and Will Pauling. 2 of those guys are portal pickups, and then Eli Raridan's the other. There's more of those on defense. Gabriel Rubio's done after this year. Jason Onye's done after this year. I believe Junior Tuilamaka is going to be done after this year. I don't think he has eligibility coming back. Devontae Smith is done after this year. Jalen Stroman is done after this year. That's your list on defense. There's not a lot of guys, Shaun, who have no choice but to leave for the NFL next year. And I think Noah Burnett, the kicker, but I'm not worried about that for now. So then the question is, okay, who comes out early? Mm-hmm. And so if certain guys come out early, it's because they have a great year and they're be top 3 draft picks. So right now, who I'm comfortable saying right now, that is you said first 3 rounds, right, Shaun? Yeah. Right now I look at it and I say Jeremiah Love, Malachi Fields. Now I saw one mock draft that had him going 8th overall. Pump the brakes a little bit on that. Like, let's see how he tests and all that. But like Malachi certainly is a day 2 draft pick, in my opinion. So you've got Eli Raridan, if he can stay healthy this year.
Yes.
Could be that. So that's 3 on offense that are likely to leave or have to leave. So I think the 2 guys on offense that are done after this year that we expect to start are guys that I think have day 2 potential, if not, in Malachi's case, day 1. I don't know that Eli has day 1. That's me kind of like, okay, I'm not jumping off that cliff yet. The guy's got like 11 career catches.
Right.
But Eli's the kind of guy, Shaun, that if he has a big year, 50 catches, and then goes and runs a 4 or 5 at the combine, maybe he could, but I'm just saying, like, right now, reasonable ceiling.
He can have a cold commit type.
Right.
Cole Kmet came back against Georgia, had a great year.
Yeah, he'll test better than Cole did, in my opinion. Yeah. So those are guys like Emil Wagner, Billy Schrouth. I don't know that those are guys that are going to come out after this year. Now, it could be a situation where Emil looks and sees what's kind of coming behind him, and he's thinking like, okay, I'm going to go now. But I don't know that either one of those guys are necessarily going to be gone either, because in Billy's case, next year would be the first full year he has as a starter. At least Emil has 16. There's a chance that Emil, if Notre Dame makes another run to the title game, Emil Wagner could have basically 3 seasons worth of starts in 2 years. He had 32 starts, Shaun. That's not that far. Usually if you start for 3 years, you've got 35 to 36 starts is usually about where you're at. sometimes, 39 if you played on a really good team and you never missed any games.
Yeah.
He'd have almost that in 2 seasons. He may look at that and say, hey, I'm getting a lot of love. And if Emil goes, then I think he's got a shot to be a day 2 pick.
Yeah.
If he doesn't go, then that means he's probably not getting that kind of feedback.
Yeah.
I feel the same way about Billy Schrauth. I think Billy Schrauth as a day 2 NFL talent, but will it be next year or will it be 27?
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of where I'm at. The 27 draft, in my opinion, is going to have a very heavy Notre Dame flavor for the offensive line, because that's when I think those 3 guys come out. Other side of the ball, I don't know that a lot of the guys that are coming out for sure are day 1 and day 2 players. I don't think Gabriel Rubio is. Jason Onye is not. At least hasn't shown it yet. Junior Tuilamaka is not. Linebacker, same thing. I don't know that any of those guys are going to come out. And like Kingston's not eligible. Drake could play himself into day 2. But I'm just not ready to go there yet. I think Drake, think about Maris, JD, and Jack. They all had 3 years of starters under their belts. Drake would have 2, but again, he'd have 32 starts, which is a lot more if they make another deep run. And that's the other thing, too, is if Notre Dame makes it to the title game or wins the title, that means some of these underclassmen performed in a way that they're going to then be in a position to leave.
Yeah.
I also don't think, so then you look at the rest of the defense. I don't think Devontae Smith is a day 1, day 2 guy, but I think he gets drafted. I don't think the Rubio and Onye and Jared Dawson are day 1 or day 2 guys right now, but I think they're all draftable, certainly, if they perform well next year. I think Junior Tuilamaka might have a tough time getting picked because he may not be a starter. The guy on defense who I could see coming out and being a day 1 pick is if Boubacar is healthy this year and just blows up. But again, I think he won't have a lot of experience, and I don't know that he'll be healthy for an entire season, like full speed healthy for an entire season. But if Boubacar goes out there and has 11, 12 sacks and he goes pro, he could be a day 1 guy. But that's why I say the 27 draft especially is going to be really nuts, because that's when we definitely know Drake's coming out, because he has to. I don't think Adon Schuler leaves early. I think he probably comes back for 1 more year. But if he leaves next year, it's probably because he's being told he could be a potential day 2 draft pick. And then you go back on the offensive side of the ball. We talked about the guys that have to leave. Well, if Jadarian Price, I think, is a guy that could go pro next year. And I saw some guys get picked in round 3 and 4, Sean, that I'm like, I'd take Jadarian Price over that guy.
I'll take him on the Bears right now over what they got at running back.
Yes. So if Jadarian goes out there, like a perfect comp for me for Jadarian Price for next year, as far as just like experience, is the kid from Georgia, Trevor Etienne, or is it? I get it's Trevor's the
younger,
the younger one, right? The running back. He got picked in the 4th round. This is a kid that never rushed for 900 yards in his career. He went in the 4th round. He was the 12th pick of the fourth round. He never, his highest number was, let me just look at his statistics. But even this year at Georgia, he's split carries. So he's a guy that is a lot like Jadarian as far as the production. He's had 3 years as a rotation guy. He had 719 yards, 6.1 per carry, 753 yards at Florida in 23, 5.9 per carry, or 5.7 per carry. And this last year, Georgia, he had 609 yards, 9 touchdowns, and averaged 5.0 yards per carry. Those aren't exactly like light the world on fire numbers. And you look at Jadarian this past year at Notre Dame, he ran for 746 yards, and he's at 6.2 per carry. I expect that number to jump. And so Trevor Etienne in his career rushed for 2,081 yards. If Jadarian just repeats what he did last year, he's not that far behind that, and he's only had 272 yards. But Jadarian for his career already has 10 rushing touchdowns, and Jadarian for his career is averaging 6.1 yards per carry, close to 6.2. Trevor Etienne in his career averaged 5.6. So we saw some guys get picked there that in this draft, Sean, that 3rd, 4th round guys that didn't exactly have like a long history of production. But what Trevor Etienne did is he tested very well. And he's a good back. He tested very well, and he brings some value as a pass catcher. That's the advantage I think he probably has right now over Jadarian, is he has 62 career catches. Jadarian has like 4 or 5, something like that.
Yeah.
But if Jadarian goes out there this year, Sean, and produces 800 plus yards again, or even if, like I predicted last week, there's a shot if Notre Dame gets to the semis again. It would not shock me if Jadarian and Jeremiah both go over 2,000 yards. Or, I mean, excuse me, go for over 1,000 yards.
1,000.
The two of them go for 1,000 yards, 2,000 yards. Brian, you've been playing too much NCAA 2025. But if they both go over 1,000 yards, it wouldn't shock me. But if Jadarian gets over 800 and is around 6'3", 6'4", 6'5" per carry, he's a draftable player next year, especially if he tests well. And I think you and I both believe he will test well because we watch him on film and nobody can catch him. He's pretty fast. So I could see 2 running backs getting taken next year, potentially in the first 3 rounds. And then Will Pauling's the other one that I think is a draftable player because he's a guy that's going to test very well. He's going to have a high vertical. He's going to have a lot of production. He's already over 1,000 yards in his career. If he ends up starting for Notre Dame this year, if he ends up beating out, I don't say not beating out, but like if he ends up playing more than Jordan Faison, or at least as much, and let's say he catches 40 balls for 600 yards, you're talking about a guy that's got 170 catches for over 2,000 yards in his career. And if he goes out and runs what Bruce Feldman said he runs, which is 4.39, that's a guy that's going to get drafted. I mean, Jaden Harrison is basically Will Pauling, but he ran a 4.57. Will Pauling has a lot more proven production, and we expect him to run much faster. Then what about Jaden Greathouse? Well, if Jaden Greathouse doesn't have a monster year, he's coming back to college for 2026. If he has a big year and declares for the draft, it's probably going to be a day 2 pick. He's not a first. I don't think Jaden Greathouse right now is like a first round guy because I don't think he'll test well enough for a league that's obsessed with that number. But if he comes out, it's probably because he's a day 2 pick. That's probably the feedback he's getting. Same thing with offensive linemen. So if next year's draft class is huge, then I think it's because they have a big year. As a team, and individual guys have big years. Christian Gray's probably not coming out next year. And if he does, it's because he had a monster year and he's probably going to be a high draft pick. Because one thing we know about Christian, by the end of next year, he'll have a lot of experience, but he'll also test very well. He'll be a 4.4 guy, if not faster, and he'll test very well. And he'll interview really well because you're just like, this is a good kid. You know what I mean? He was raised right, smart kid, fun-loving kid, talks a lot about his faith. Like the character stuff will get box checked. You know, the testing box checked, a lot of snaps box checked, a lot of production box checked. So if Christian does come out, Shaun, it's because he had a big year for Notre Dame and he'll get picked high. If he doesn't have a big year, just has a good year, then he's coming back and he's going to be part of the 26-27 draft. And that's what we're saying is next year is going to start, in my opinion, more of the day 1, day 2 numbers. But I don't know that the overall numbers are going to be like 12, 13, 14, unless Notre Dame wins a title. And then it's like, dude, you got to go now and strike while the iron's hot. Then you could see maybe a Don come out. Maybe Drake comes out. Maybe, Boubacar plays a big role in that. Burnham, you even talk about Josh Burnham. Now, he's another guy that has another year of eligibility left after this year. But if he comes out, what's the reason why? It's primarily because he probably played real well. And we think he'll test really well. So that's the thing, Shaun, is if Notre Dame has more than one, like if any of their linemen come out, it's because they had a big year on offense and those guys are getting told they're going to be high draft picks.
And then it's going to be an interesting conversation to whereas, is there a need for you to come back, right? What are the conversations? Because when you have the exit interviews, there's a conversation with the staff, you receive information from the NFL, and then you look at, like you said, if you're coming off winning a championship, there's no need to want to come back to win a championship, right? And so also, if I go back, man, I got Will Black, I got Derby Land. It's like, it's really no need for me to go back. Because now, as an upperclassman, you don't want to leave your team hanging.
That's a great, you're saying basically they're going to say, hey, I'm not leaving my team in a bad spot because I know what's coming down.
I know what's coming up, right?
I could see Emil Wagner being that type of guy.
Absolutely.
Where if he felt like, hey, I'm ready, but I feel like I'm leaving Notre Dame in a bad spot, I may come back.
Right.
I could see him if he was getting told he was going to be a high pick. Yeah, I can see that, Ron.
I think Joe Alt might have had thoughts like that. Like, I could leave early.
Quentin Nelson did. I know that for a fact.
Nelson definitely did. Right.
Yeah, I know that for a fact. He wasn't actually going to come back, but he had that initial, like, like
because it's a conversation you have to
Yeah.
have. It's a
Yeah.
real life conversation.
Yeah.
Like, man, what's best for me? What do I need to do?
I think he also knew what was going to happen that next year.
Yeah.
That they were going to be a pretty good team that next year also.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he made the right decision. But the point you're making is like McGlinchey didn't have to make that kind of decision because McGlinchey was done. McGlinchey made that decision the year before.
Yeah.
And like Ronnie Stanley coming back after 2014, there were people saying he might be a late first round pick, but he had to make a decision. Do I want to come back, get better? And, he did and ended up working out for him. So we've seen a lot of those guys kind of go through that, Shaun, where.
And like you said, football's different now because these guys are playing a lot of football now.
Yeah.
Like what it took 3 years to accumulate an experience, you're doing it now in 2 seasons.
Yeah.
So that speeds up the clock.
Snaps and games played. Yeah,
absolutely.
Good point.
People bring up Jadarian Price. Jadarian Price, who says he wants to take any more snaps in college, because he had an Achilles. His situation is different. How is he thinking after this season if he gets 1,000 yards with 7 to 8 touchdowns and then Notre Dame makes the national championship? Mm-hmm. Does he come back to be the guy at Notre Dame? Or does he say, you know what, I'm good. I think I can go ahead and test well and get into day 2. You know, that's a conversation. But I think everything is healthier. And I think what we will have, like I said, you had it last year in 23. You didn't have it in this year. You had it in 24, but you didn't have it in the 25 draft class. What you have in 26 and 27 is that you already have the stars in place. Jeremiah Love's the star next year. That they're coming to see Jeremiah Love next year. And he might have Malachi Fields might be a co-star based upon the way things go. You go to 26, you'll have Christian Gray, you'll have Drake, heck, you'll even have Leonard Moore thinking about leaving early. So now you're talking about Bryce Young.
Like, you want to talk about potential first-round impact. Let's look ahead to the 27 class if most of those guys come back. Jagasol comes back. He's potentially that guy. Maybe Emil becomes a first-round draft pick if he's now a 3-year starter at Notre Dame. Because for him to be a 3-year starter at Notre Dame means he's have to hold, Will Black and Kirby Lambert off for a couple years. That's a pretty good football player. Boubacar, potential first-round pick. Bryce Young, potential first-round pick. Drake Bowen, potential day 1, day 2 pick. I think probably more day 2, so round 2, 3 as opposed to round 1. But if Drake comes out and runs like a 4.5 at the combine, then, all of a sudden he shoots up into that round 1 area, depending on what season he Leonard Moore is a first-round type of draft pick. Christian Gray, if he has the kind of jump he can have, is capable of being a first-round draft pick, at the very least a day 2 guy, kind of where Benjamin had, because he wouldn't have, hopefully, at that point in time, the injury concerns that Benjamin had. And then a Don Schuler in 2027 could be that type of guy. Jaden Greathouse comes out in 2027. He's that kind of player. So you look at it, Shaun, and at Billy Schrauth would then be part of the 27 draft because he'd have to be. That's another guy that I think is a day 1 or day 2 guy. So when you talk about the 26 and 27 draft class, I think 26 starts to kind of ramp up more day 1, day 2 picks overall than we've seen. 27 is when the door gets kicked down because all those players that you and I view as elite players will either be eligible finally, Bryce Young, Leonard Moore, for Anthony Knapp might be another one to consider in that 27 draft class because he'll then be going into his junior year. And if he's still starting, has a ton of snaps under his belt, what does he decide to do? I don't know if he'd be a guy that'd come out after his true junior year, but he'd have so much experience by that point in time. If Notre Dame wins the title in 2026 and CJ Carr's a 2-year starter, is it a given that he's going to come back for his senior year? I would hope so. But you get what I'm saying, Shaun? So, what running back breaks out? That 27, that's Keidron Young and Neas Williams are now eligible for the draft. So there's just a lot of things like the 26, 27 draft class. That's when you're really going to see the Marcus Freeman effect take hold. Because unlike people in the past, he so far has shown an ability to get more out of the players they have earlier than even the previous staff had when they were veterans. And as long as that continues, then you start to understand why when we look at this team, we start thinking like this team is going to start wrecking the draft. And again, the NFL tends to overdraft the best from the best teams. They just do. And I get it to a degree. I get it. Like, hey, you want winners? Go draft guys that are part of winners. Notre Dame coaches do this all the time. It's not an end-all, be-all, Shaun, but there's a lot of times you hear them say, this guy comes from a great program. I mean, that's one of the things they loved about Kingston. He plays arguably the best high school program in the country. You know, you guys talk about IMG all you want. That's not really a high school program. That's basically a prep school for high school kids. St. John Bosco is a private school. They recruit from that, but it's still a high school because it's a high school and it's normal students and it's not just all athletes. And it's also everyone's from that. You don't see a bunch of guys from like Ohio moving out to play 1 year at St. John Bosco. They're all kind of local kids. It's the best of the local kids, but it's still a high school. They do that, but it's not the end all be all. And the more Notre Dame wins, the more you're going to see them start to get the benefit of the doubt. Xavier Watts for the 26 Notre Dame team, 25 Notre Dame team, maybe gets more of the benefit of the doubt after 2 years of making a deep run than maybe he did this year. Same thing with guys like Riley Mills and players like that. The other thing too is a lot of the guys coming down the pike, Shaun, are not players that have physical limitations you have to overcome, like a J.D. Bertrand, like a Jack Kaiser, because Jack's never going to be real big, real long. That's not true for Drake. That's not true for Kingston. Oh, and I forgot to mention Kingston is another potential 2027 draft type of guy. That's not true for Leonard Moore. That's not true for Christian Gray. That's not true for any of the offensive linemen. It's not true for Jaden Greathouse, who's 6'1", 215. You know what I mean, Shaun? So, like, you're now putting in guys that have the physical tools that the NFL looks for on top of the production and the play. That's the difference where a lot of the Notre Dame – I mean, Howard Cross is a perfect example. If Gaber Rubio has a year of film like Riley Mills or Howard Cross had, he's getting drafted. Howard Cross is not because he's 6'5", 315. So those are all things that you look at too, Shaun, is Jason Onye is going to get more of the benefit of the doubt if he has a big year than Howard Cross would because he checks off, 6'5", super long arms, 300 pounds, athletic. He's going to check off all those boxes if he can be healthy and play a whole year, where Howard Cross is, no matter what you do on tape, and again, I didn't love the tape this year, but even if it was good tape, you're still going to be 6'1", you're still going to be 285, you're still going to have short arms. And you're not an elite athlete. There's nothing that there's no coaching that can fix that. And that's what's going to be very interesting about how they're viewed in the NFL is because they're recruiting more of the measurables to Notre Dame as opposed to the try-hard guys. J.D. Bertrand was a great college linebacker, in my opinion, his last couple of years. But he was a great college linebacker. He was never going to be a guy that's going to be a – J.D. could have come back for 9 years in college, and he was never going to be a first-round draft pick. Why? Because he's barely 6'1", barely 230 pounds, and he's not a 4'4". So those are things that I look at, Shaun, and I say that's what's different now, where Drake Bowen is going to be 6'2 plus, 230 plus. Kingston's going to be 6'3, 240. Leonard Moore 6'2, Christian Gray 6'1 with really long arms. Like now your small guys are like your 6-foot safety, Adon Schuler, who's already built better than Xavier. I mean, Adon right now looks better physically than Xavier. He's not the player Xavier was, but like he's going to walk. Like you saw the pro day, Shaun, Xavier Watts is not a chiseled guy. Like he's not. That's his body type. Adon walks in, you're like, holy crap. Like that guy looks the part.
Who is that kid?
Yeah. And that's the difference between what they're bringing in now. The Woes was there.
So now think about that. Xavier, Adon,
right?
Improved body type. Jadon, Ethan, Joey O'Brien, possibly.
Right.
Like,
Bronte Johnson.
Yes. This is how you
somebody
change
just mentioned
the draft.
Bronte in the chat too. 6'2".
Yes.
Like, yeah.
Yes. This is how
and here's the thing. We're talking way down to the 27 draft. Jadon Blair won't even be eligible for that draft.
Yeah.
He's not going to be eligible for draft till 2028.
Yeah.
That's the thing that starts getting you excited. And when we talk about the team, we're not even getting into the guys that are coming in the freshman class who won't even be eligible for either of those two drafts.
Yeah.
Jadon Blair, James Flanagan, Will Black, those type of guys. So it is exciting to look at what they're doing, Shaun. I mean, it really is. Think about how many guys that you and I believe have first-round talent. And what I mean by first-round talent is I watch these guys get picked in the first round, and I'm like, that dude is as physically gifted as that dude. Now, they got to go out and prove it on the field. Bryce Young right now is not a first-round draft pick. He's not a first-round player. What I'm saying is he has first-round tools. Now let's see if he can develop into a first-round talent.
Yeah.
And that's what I mean. Like C.J. Carr right now is not a first-round quarterback. He's not one of those. If he comes out this right now, he's not. What I'm saying is I think the tools are there for him to eventually develop into that type of quarterback. And if Jackson Dart can be a first-round draft pick, then I think C.J. Carr, when he has the experience in production and development, can be a first-round draft pick. And that's my point. Most of these guys right now, Kingston comes out right now, he's not a first-round draft pick. What I'm saying is I think he has the tools that when he gets the development experience needed, he will then be able to be that kind of player. Charles Jagasaw right now is not a first-round draft pick. They'd be like, he's got 2 starts because of injuries. What I'm saying is the tools are there for him someday to be a first-round draft pick. Because, again, I see some of the guys getting drafted. I pop in the film, and I'm like, that dude's not as good as the Notre Dame dude. And that's what leads me to believe that they have that type of potential. They have to now go prove it in development. But when I say Bryce Young's a first-round talent, Boubacar, it's not that they are right now. It's they have the tools to be that. So when I look at the 26 draft class, Shaun, I see Jeremiah, as long as there's no setbacks or injuries, being a first-round type of guy. I think Malachi Fields is certainly, you said first 3 rounds. I think he's that type of player. I believe that Eli Raridan could be that type of player. If any of the offensive linemen come out, they will be that type of player. The question is going to be, will next year's draft be more offensive heavy for Notre Dame, where this year's draft and last year's draft were more defensive heavy for Notre Dame? That's the interesting thing, because there's actually more high-level picks that are eligible for the NFL draft on offense than defense. Like, I don't know that any of the young guys on defense or the veterans on defense, even if they have great years, are first round or even day 2 draft picks, unless I'm forgetting someone. Like, I don't see that. So now I do think that Devontae Smith could end up being, if he tests well, could end up being the first nickel to get drafted, because he's just a little thicker, a little bigger than the last 2 nickels. It's a little bit more of a natural cover guy than Thomas Harper was, but he's more physical than what Jordan Clark was. Problem with Jordan Clark was he was always small and he wasn't an elite athlete. And if you're going to be that small, you better be an elite athlete. But, like, nobody thought that he was going to come to Notre Dame and be a draft pick, because he's a 6-year player. If he was that type of athlete, he would have – wasn't like he came from, Arizona Western. He came from Arizona State, So Rod Hurd didn't like, hey, come here and you're going to be drafted. Like, they weren't that kind of guy. R.J. Oben was the one that I thought was going to come here and have a shot to get drafted. That was a very disappointing performance from him. But, again, I won't trade all of that for what the one play he did give us.
You know what else might be interesting, B? Because we talked about this throughout the spring, especially with the defensive line and how they're viewed now. If we start seeing more sprinkled in odd fronts, how does that impact the evaluation of NFL teams that are 3-4 teams,
right?
And how they look at Notre Dame guys now? All of these things now come into play. So it's going to be interesting in seeing how now Chris Ash takes what's left in the cupboard and how he cooks it up, as opposed to how it was cooked by very successfully by the previous defensive coordinator, and how that might give someone a chance or a better chance from a draft evaluation than they might have had, before. That's something else to think about. But like you said, things are trending upward.
Sure.
Hey, I've been doing it, going to the pro day for the last 3 to 4 years. I'm very much looking forward to the next 2 to 3 years.
Well, let me just say this, Shaun. Like you just said, I remember you and I talking about that. You just look at the players that are coming back, and they just look different. I mean, you're at the pro day, and you're watching 5'11 and a half, 6 foot Xavier Watts. You're watching 5'9 Jordan Clark. And then cheering them on are 6'2 Leonard Moore, 6'3 Bronte Johnson, 6'4 Luke Tallage, 6'5 Janon Blair, 6 foot plus Christian Gray. 6'1" Carson Hobbs, Dallas Golden 6 feet, Mark Zachary 6 feet, Cree Thomas is 6'1". You look at linebacker, who's cheering on 6'1", 230-pound Jack Kaiser. It's 6'2.5", 240-pound Drake Bowen. It's 6'3", 235-pound Kingston Viliama-Asa. It's 6'2", 225-pound Madden Faramo. You know, like who's cheering on RJ Oben? It's 6'7", 260-pound Bryce Young. It's 6'4", 35. I've been told Boubacar has 35+ inch arms. That's what I've been told. Like that's who. Like it just visually looks different now. You see Charles Jagasol walk up, you're like, that is a mountain of a man. Like that is a large human being. You know, you look at Emil Wagner and he's filling out, but you just see like, I'm curious to see what Emil's arm length is at Pro Day and Combine. I'll bet you he's 34+ arm length. I'll bet you he is. I can't remember who told me this, but there was a player. I can't remember if it was I think it was an offensive lineman. Somebody inside the program told me that one of their kids has 36-inch arms. I don't know that I believe that, but like they're like, no, look, wait till he comes. I think it was an offensive lineman. And I'm like, that's kind of nuts. But even if they're a half inch off or an inch off, it's 35-inch arms. You know what I mean? Like it's just even the D tackles. Like the last couple of years, like Riley Mills stood out because he was so much bigger than everyone else. It's not going to be the case now. Like Jared Dawson's going to look like one of the old school Notre Dame D linemen, but then there's like 6'5", 315 Gabriel Rubio, 6'5", 310 Jason Onye. It just looks different now. Josh Burnham, 6'4", 240 with long arms. It just looks different now. And that's the other part of this too, Shaun, is when you see these guys, you're just like, they look different. You know, Jeremiah Love just moves different. Jadarian even looks different. So, those are things that factor into it. It's the boxes are being checked, and it's not what a great kid, try-hard kid, smart, quality athlete, but he's 6'1", 225. And if Drew White was 6'3", 235 pounds and still ran like he ran, Drew White's getting drafted. There's no doubt in my mind he's getting drafted. He's a good football player, very good football player, but he's 6 foot, 220 pounds. So that 4.59 that he ran doesn't impress me all that much when you're, or I think it was 4.69. That doesn't impress me all that much when you're 6 foot, 220 pounds. That's the difference. And that's what kind of gets you fired up. So anyway, Shaun, good talk. I want to get to a couple quick super chats here real quick. Anthony Solomon, thank you for the show today. Appreciate that super chat, Anthony. And you are certainly welcome for that. Very, very much. Raymond Harton, also with a super chat. Raymond said, thank you, Raymond. Sorry for being off topic, Brian, so don't shoot me. Never would. But exactly what time of what day can we look at the clock and know where we stand with the transfer portal? I believe it's midnight Tuesday. I believe. So I thought it would have been Sunday, but it was actually 2 business days from when they put them in. I don't know that anyone's going to jump on the portal, guys. I mean, it's possible, but from what I'm told, there's a chance. So I'll just say this. Well, I'll just say I'm going to put something on the message board in a little bit in response to this, Ray, and you'll be able to see it. But I don't know that it's a given that anyone's going to jump in now for a bunch of different reasons. So I'm going to put a little intel piece on the board here in a little bit, Raymond. But it's basically by 5 o'clock on Tuesday, if Notre Dame hasn't put something in, then I'd say like they have until midnight, but why would they wait till midnight? I think by 5 o'clock on Tuesday, if nobody's put their name, if nothing's announced, then that means nobody put their name in. Now, keep in mind, grad transfers, I believe, still have the option to jump in at any point in time. That technically they have the window as well, but they have more leeway and more freedom to do things. But it would really be 5 o'clock on Tuesday. But I don't know that we're going to see anything. I'm going to make some more phone calls today, try and see if I can figure some stuff out, and we'll go from there. But as of this morning, I don't think it's a given that anybody is going to go in. I asked somebody last night, I expect any announcements, and I was told no. That doesn't mean that may not change. Because they may be trying to convince kids not to jump in, and then use that 48-hour window to do that, and then they change their mind. But we'll see how that plays out. But it's not a given that anybody's going to jump in, because they were going to have guys jump in if the rule would have been passed for the 105 limit. That just would have had to. You'd have had actually at least 11 would have had to jump in. But with that being out, I just think that speaks volumes to what they're building. Even if a couple guys jump in that I'm hearing, because I was told flat out, Shaun, you know the names. I told you the names. Flat out, this guy's leaving. And whatever reason, when they had their exit interviews, it sounds like with a lot of those guys, their opinions changed. One guy for sure, I was told last night, he's staying for now. I didn't like the for now part, but that's, it's better than he's leaving. You know what I mean? So we'll see how the next couple of days play out. But it's very interesting. If a guy is leaving, he's already put his name in. He's already submitted the paperwork to Notre Dame. It just means that Notre Dame hasn't sent the paperwork into the NCAA. That's basically what that means. If a guy hadn't put his name in by Friday, then he's not jumping in. That's basically what that means. Notre Dame has a period before they have to submit the paperwork to the NCAA, and the guy then officially goes in the portal. So it's going to be interesting, Shaun. Very, very interesting. So thank you for being with me today, my friend. It's a good show. Anything else that you want to discuss? Any other draft stuff you want to mention before we get out of here?
Maybe I'll jump on with you a little later in the week.
Have that conversation.
Tap into, we're going on 3.5.
Yeah.
I want to give that a longer runway. Some stuff I could talk about, but I need a longer runway for that.
I got you.
It's been great, though. It's great to get back into the mode.
Yeah.
Notre Dame's back on the road, and the time off was needed, So I'm ready to see how Notre Dame goes into this their junior day camps and official visits and a lot of different things. I talked to a couple of kids. Matter of fact, a couple of kids contacted me during the show, so we're going to have some more recruiting stuff coming up, and look forward to a couple of decisions coming up soon that might be in the favor of the Fighting Irish in a week or so. So,
love it.
Yeah.
Well, Shaun, I got some people may have to try to convince you to come join one of the mailbags one of these days this week, Shaun. And
I'm all for it.
We'll have to see. We'll have to talk about it. So, everybody, thanks for being with us today. Great numbers today. Great chat today. For Shaun, I'm Bryan. Have an awesome rest of your day. Hey, look. I mean,
that's my guy. What's up, T Squared?
So he I may have y'all do it instead of me. You never know.
Hey,
you never know.
T Squared is 80 degrees right now in Chicago. I'll give you one guess where I'm headed after we're done with this show. Trevor knows the answer.
Real quick, we did get a super chat from Dolly Madison, a big one. Dolly, I always enjoy your show. Thank you. You are very welcome, and thank you for that super chat. That is awesome. We really, really appreciate it very much. Very, very much. So that's a great way to end the show, Shaun. Folks, hit that like on your way out. Hit that subscribe button on your way out. Hit that notification bell. For Shaun, I'm Bryan. As he said, right down there, boards.irishbreakdown.com. That's where some of that recruiting intel is going to be. That's where I'm going to put my portal intel. I did my big board for the offensive class and the defensive class for 26 last night. My rankings for the current commits. So I have my 7 offensive players ranked, my 5 defensive players ranked, current grade, upside grade, film analysis, all of it done. That's on the message board. You can check that out at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Have an awesome rest of your day. We'll see y'all again tomorrow. There's a chance we may start at noon tomorrow. So that's why you need to make sure you have that notification bell on. It's the last week of the construction. They may have something going on here at 3. I got to find out for sure. We should know by the end of the day. We may start at noon. I'll let you guys know for sure. It'll be the only day this week that really gets jacked up. But make sure you check that out. And we'll talk to you again here very, very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.